So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was the Phoenix God Refugee from a lost universe. Naruto x Android 21, Dragon Ball FighterZ. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. The void was not empty. It was a cacophony of dying light, a chorus of collapsing stars, and the final mournful sigh of a universe bleeding out its last dregs of existence. He had been there for it all, a silent, blazing sentinel against the encroaching, insatiable entropy. He was not a god in the sense that the fleeting, ephemeral mortals of countless worlds understood the term. He was a fundamental principle, a law of existence made manifest, a being of pure, sentient star fire named Fenikusu. His purpose, his very essence, was the cycle. The grand, glorious, and heartbreakingly beautiful dance of creation and destruction, of birth and rebirth. He was the phoenix, and this was his pyre. But something was wrong. The pyre was not meant to be the end. It was meant to be a transformation, a shedding of a cosmic skin to allow for the birth of a new, vibrant reality. This time, however, there was no rebirth. There was only an ending. A great, gnawing emptiness that was not just the absence of light, but the death of it. An entity, a concept so anathema to his being that it had no name in the lexicon of his ancient race, was devouring everything. And as his universe crumbled, as the last galaxies were snuffed out like errant embers, Fenikusu did the only thing he could. He fled. He gathered the last vestiges of his power, a shimmering, incandescent core of life and light, and pushed. He pushed against the fabric of a reality that was ceasing to be, a desperate, instinctual flight from the absolute nothingness that awaited him. He was a refugee, a god without a dominion, a king without a kingdom. And as he tore through the non-space between what was and what would never be again, his immense consciousness, his eons of memories and wisdom, began to unravel. The journey was a maelstrom of uncreation, stripping him of his power, his form, his very sense of self. He was a dying star streaking through an impossible night, and as his light faded, he fell. He fell into a world of vibrant, chaotic energy. A world teeming with a life force so potent, so raw, that it was like a balm to his wounded essence. It was a primitive world, a world of warring clans and hidden villages, of chakra and jutsu, a far cry from the cosmic ballet he had once conducted. But it was alive, and as his consciousness flickered, on the verge of extinguishing forever, it found a vessel. A newborn child, wailing in the arms of a grim-faced man with spiky yellow hair. A child with a maelstrom of an entirely different kind sealed within his infant body. The child's name, a final, whispered prayer from a dying mother, was Naruto Uzumaki. And in that moment, in a flash of light unseen by any mortal eye, the last of the Phoenix gods and the newborn Jinchuriki became one. The early years of Naruto Uzumaki's life were a study in quiet contradiction. He was the pariah of the village, the demon child, the outcast. He was met with glares of hatred, with whispered insults that he was too young to understand but old enough to feel. He was ostracized, isolated, a lonely figure on a swing set that no other child dared to approach. But where there should have been anger, there was a serene, almost unnerving, calm. Where there should have been tears of frustration, there were eyes of an impossible, ancient blue that seemed to see not just the world around him, but the intricate, invisible threads that bound it together. He did not cry. He did not scream. He did not throw tantrums. He simply observed. He watched the way the sunlight filtered through the leaves of the trees, and in his mind's eye, he saw the complex dance of photons, the fusion reactions of a distant star. He watched the intricate hand seals of the shinobi, and he saw not just the manipulation of chakra, but the fundamental laws of energy conversion, the elegant mathematics of a power he dimly remembered wielding on a galactic scale. He was a child prodigy, but not in a way that anyone could comprehend. He absorbed information not through rote memorization, but through an intuitive, vague understanding of the universe's underlying principles. The Academy's curriculum was a child's primer to a master of quantum physics. His instructors were baffled. He would complete written exams with a speed and accuracy that was simply impossible for a child his age. He would master jutsu after a single demonstration, not by mimicking the hand seals, but by grasping the core concept of the technique and replicating it with a flawless efficiency that bordered on the sublime. But he was not arrogant. He was not boastful. He was simply efficient. He saw the world as a complex system, a grand, beautiful machine. And he had an innate, almost instinctual, understanding of how it worked. This quiet, preternatural intelligence was as much a source of his isolation as the demon sealed within him. The other children found him strange, unsettling. He didn't play their games. He didn't understand their jokes. He looked at them with an ancient, patient wisdom that a child had no right to possess. And so, he remained alone, a silent observer in a world that did not understand him. It was on one of these lonely afternoons, as he sat on his swing, tracing the complex patterns of wind currents with his eyes, that he first met her. Ino Yamanaka. She was a whirlwind of lavender and blonde, a girl with a confidence that bordered on arrogance and a sharp, intelligent gaze that missed nothing. She was the star of her year, a prodigy in her own right, the heiress to the famed Yamanaka clan. And she had noticed the anomaly. She had seen him in the academy, the quiet, blank-faced boy who outperformed everyone without a single bead of sweat. She had seen the way the instructors would look at him, a mixture of awe and fear. And it infuriated her. She was Ino Yamanaka. She was meant to be the best. And this nobody was making a mockery of her efforts. She marched up to him, her hands on her hips, a scowl on her pretty face. "You, Naruto Uzumaki." He turned to her, his blue eyes calm, unblinking. Yes, his voice was soft, melodic, with a strange, resonant quality that seemed to vibrate in the air around him. It threw her off for a moment. She had expected a mumbled greeting, a nervous stutter. Not this quiet confidence. "How do you do it?" she demanded. "The tests, the jutsu. You're cheating. You have to be." He tilted his head, a gesture of genuine curiosity. "Cheating implies a deception. I am simply answering the questions. But you don't even study. I've seen you. You just sit there, staring into space." "I am studying," he replied, his gaze drifting back to the swirling leaves. "Just not from a book." Ino gritted her teeth. The arrogance. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," he said, his eyes meeting hers again, a faint ghost of a smile on his lips, "that the universe is a far more interesting textbook than anything the Academy has to offer." She was speechless. She had come here expecting to intimidate him, to expose him, to put him in his place. But she had been utterly disarmed. There was no malice in his words, no aura of superiority. Just a simple, unshakable statement of fact. He believed what he was saying. And the strangest part was, she almost did too. From that day on, Ino Yamanaka became a Naruto Uzumaki watcher. She observed him with the keen eye of a rival, looking for any flaw, any weakness, any sign of the deception she was convinced he was perpetrating. But she found none. She only found more questions. She saw him spend hours in the library, not reading the academy textbooks, but devouring complex scrolls on fuinjutsu, medical ninjutsu, even ancient, forgotten clan histories. She saw him in the training grounds, not practicing the same jutsu over and over again, but experimenting, deconstructing the techniques, rebuilding them into something new, something more efficient. He was an enigma, a puzzle that she couldn't solve. And for a girl who prided herself on her intellect, on her ability to read people, it was both infuriating and intoxicating. She wouldn't admit it, not even to herself, but her obsession with the strange, quiet boy was slowly morphing into something else. A grudging respect, a reluctant admiration, and, buried deep beneath her pride, a flicker of something more. Naruto, for his part, was aware of her scrutiny. He saw her watching him from the corners of his eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. He found it amusing. In a world that either hated him or ignored him, her intense, focused attention was a novelty. He saw the sharp, analytical mind behind her arrogant facade, the fierce, competitive spirit that drove her. He saw a kindred spirit, in a way, a fellow seeker of knowledge, albeit one who was still looking at the world through a keyhole. He didn't know it yet, but these early, seemingly insignificant interactions were the first threads in a complex, cosmic tapestry that was beginning to weave itself around him. A tapestry that would soon draw in others, powerful, brilliant, and broken individuals who would be drawn to the quiet, unassuming boy who was so much more than he appeared. One such individual was already aware of him, though from a much greater distance. Tsunade, the legendary Sannin, the world's greatest medical nin, and in this world, the formidable, ruthless commander of the Anbu Black Ops. She had not left the village after the death of her beloved Dan. Instead, she had buried her grief under a mountain of duty, her heart encased in a shell of cynicism and ice. She had become the shadow that protected the light, the iron fist that maintained Konoha's fragile peace. And from the shadows, she had watched the Jinchuriki. She had been there, in the periphery, on the night of his birth. She had seen the fourth Hokage's sacrifice, the sealing of the Nine Tails, the birth of the village's greatest weapon and its most hated pariah. And for years, she had monitored him, her reports to the third Hokage cold, clinical, and detached. But lately, her reports had become different. They were filled with observations that she couldn't explain. The boy's preternatural intelligence, his impossible learning curve, his strange, serene demeanor in the face of so much hatred. He was an anomaly, a variable that didn't fit any of her carefully constructed psychological profiles. He was not the broken, angry child she had expected him to become. He was something else. She had ordered a full, top-secret investigation into his background, his every movement, his every interaction. But the reports that me back were as baffling as her own observations. He was a ghost, an enigma. He had no friends, no family, no hobbies outside of his relentless pursuit of knowledge. He was a blank slate, a perfectly crafted weapon in the making. And that, more than anything, scared her. Weapons could be turned, weapons could be broken, and a weapon of this magnitude, in the hands of a boy who was becoming more and more of an unknown quantity, was a threat that she could not ignore. She had made a note in his file, a single, chilling directive, person of interest. To be monitored with extreme prejudice. Tsunade, the hardened spymaster, the woman who had seen the worst of humanity, could not have known the irony of her own words. The boy she saw as a potential threat was not a weapon to be wielded, but a force of nature that had been unleashed. A force that would not just reshape her world, but her own shattered heart. But that was a story for another day. For now, she was the shadow, and he was the enigma. And the world, blissfully unaware, continued to turn. Years passed. The quiet, observant boy became a quiet, formidable genin. He was placed on a team with Sasuke Uchiha, the last of his clan, a boy consumed by a cold, burning rage. And Sakura Haruno, a girl whose affections were as transparent as glass. Their Jonin instructor was Kakashi Hatake, the legendary copy ninja, a man as brilliant as he was lazy. His own past a tapestry of tragedy and loss. It was a team of broken, powerful individuals, a microcosm of the shinobi world itself. And in the center of it all was Naruto, the calm, unshakable eye of the storm. He did not compete with Sasuke for Sakura's attention. He did not rise to the Uchiha's goading. He simply did his job. And he did it with a quiet, terrifying competence that left his teammates and his instructor speechless. During the infamous bell test, he had not engaged Kakashi in a direct confrontation. Instead, he had sat under a tree, his eyes closed, and had simply waited. Kakashi, his curiosity piqued, had approached him, only to find himself trapped in an intricate, almost invisible web of chakra threads, a technique that Naruto had seemingly invented on the spot. He had then explained, in his calm, melodic voice, the fundamental flaws in the test's design, the psychological manipulation at its core, and the optimal, three-person strategy for acquiring the bells. Kakashi had been so stunned that he had simply given them the bells, a bemused, slightly disturbed smile hidden behind his mask. Missions with Team 7 were a study in efficiency. Naruto was the strategist, the analyst, the one who saw 10 steps ahead of everyone else. He would deconstruct their opponents' jutsu with a single glance, identify their weaknesses with a terrifying accuracy, and formulate a plan of attack that was both elegant and brutally effective. He did not seek the spotlight. He did not crave glory. He was the silent, unseen hand that guided his team to victory, the quiet, unassuming powerhouse who was content to let his teammates take the credit. Sasuke hated him for it. He saw Naruto's quiet competence as a personal insult, a mockery of his own desperate quest for power. He could not understand how the dead last, the dobi of the academy, could so effortlessly surpass him. He saw Naruto's calm, serene demeanor as a sign of arrogance, a belief that he was so far above Sasuke that he wasn't even worth acknowledging as a rival. And so, Sasuke pushed himself harder, his hatred for his brother, Itachi, now mingled with a new, burning resentment for his quiet, enigmatic teammate. Sakura, on the other hand, was simply confused. She had been raised to believe that Sasuke was the pinnacle of what a shinobi could be. He was a genius, an Uchiha, the last of a legendary clan. And yet, time and time again, it was Naruto who saved them, Naruto who had the answers, Naruto who seemed to operate on a level that she couldn't even begin to comprehend. Her childhood crush on Sasuke was slowly being eroded by a growing, reluctant respect for the boy she had once dismissed as a loser. Kakashi, for his part, was a mixture of awe and terror. He had never seen a shinobi like Naruto. The boy had an intuitive understanding of chakra that surpassed even his own. He had a strategic mind that would have made the fourth Hokage proud. And he had a strange, almost otherworldly, wisdom that seemed to come from a place far beyond his years. Kakashi knew that he was not teaching Naruto. He was simply observing him. And he had a sinking feeling that he was witnessing the birth of something that would change the world forever. And so, the stage was set. The players were in position. The quiet, unassuming boy who was the last of a dying race of gods was about to embark on a journey that would shake the foundations of his new world. A journey that would lead him to a hidden laboratory in the land of iron, to a brilliant, beautiful, and utterly inhuman scientist who would see him not as a boy, but as the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe. The Phoenix had been reborn in a world of ninjas and demons. And the flames of his destiny were about to be ignited. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Song of the Ice Flower. The journey to the land of waves began under a sky the color of a dull, unpolished pearl. The air, thick with the humidity of a summer on the cusp of turning, clung to the skin like a damp shroud. For Team 7, it was their first C-rank mission, a simple escort duty for a bridge builder named Tazuna. For Sasuke, it was a tedious distraction from his training. For Sakura, it was a chance to prove her worth, and perhaps, to catch Sasuke's eye. For Kakashi, it was a headache waiting to happen, a fact made plainly obvious by the bridge builder's perpetually flushed face and the reek of cheap sake that wafted from him like a noxious aura. For Naruto, however, it was a symphony of new sensations. He walked with a preternatural silence, his FEET barely disturbing the dust of the road. His cosmic consciousness, the fragmented remnants of Fenikusu, was a vast, silent ocean, and the world around him was a constant stream of new, fascinating data. He could feel the intricate network of roots beneath the earth, the slow, patient life of the ancient trees that lined the path. He could see the way the sunlight, filtered through the thick canopy, was not just a wave, but a particle, a stream of quantized energy that nourished the vibrant ecosystem around them. He could hear the low, thrumming hum of the planet's magnetic field, a deep, resonant bass note in the grand orchestra of existence. And he could feel the emotional states of his companions, not through any Yamanaka mind-reading trick, but through the subtle, almost imperceptible fluctuations in their chakra signatures. Sasuke's chakra was a tightly coiled spring, vibrating with impatience and a cold, simmering rage. Sakura's was a fluttering, erratic hummingbird, a chaotic whirlwind of anxiety and infatuation. Kakashi's was a deep, still lake, its surface calm, but with a powerful, hidden current of melancholy and vigilance lurking in its depths. And Tazuna's chakra was a sputtering, flickering candle flame, a maelstrom of fear masked by a boisterous, alcoholic bravado. It was this last observation that held Naruto's attention. The mission was a simple C rank. There should be no reason for such profound, gut-wrenching terror. He had cross-referenced the mission scroll's details with Konoha's economic and political intelligence on the land of waves before they had left. A third-rate shipping magnate named Gato had taken control of the island nation's economy, driving it into poverty. A bridge connecting the island to the mainland would break his monopoly. It was a simple, logical equation. But the fear emanating from Tazuna was not the fear of a man facing economic ruin. It was the fear of a man who was already dead. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the humid air with a quiet clarity. Kakashi, who had been engrossed in his ever-present Ica Ica Paradise novel, didn't even look up. Yes, Naruto, the mission parameters are incorrect. This got everyone's attention. Sasuke scoffed, a flicker of annoyance in his dark eyes. What are you talking about, Dobi? It's a simple escort mission. Sakura chimed in, her voice laced with an almost desperate desire to agree with Sasuke. He's right, Naruto. Don't be such a weirdo. It's just AC rank. Naruto ignored them, his gaze fixed on Kakashi. The client is lying. His fear is disproportionate to the stated threat level. He expects to be attacked by shinobi, not common thugs or bandits. This is, at the very least, a B rank mission, possibly A rank. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Tazuna froze, his hand halfway to the gourd of sake at his hip. Kakashi slowly, deliberately, closed his book, a single, visible eye narrowing in thought. He had felt it too, of course. The inconsistencies, the sense that something was off. But he had dismissed it as simple paranoia, the natural caution of a veteran shinobi. For his youngest, most enigmatic student to have not only noticed it, but to have articulated it with such cold, clinical certainty, it was unsettling. Explain your reasoning, Kakashi said, his voice losing its lazy drawl, replaced by the sharp, focused tone of a commander. The economic impact of the bridge's construction is a direct threat to Gato's shipping empire, Naruto began, his voice a calm, steady stream of logic. Gato is a man of considerable, albeit illegally obtained, wealth. It is a statistical probability that he has hired shinobi to protect his interests. Tazuna is the architect of that threat. Therefore, he is a primary target. His fear signature is consistent with an individual who is being actively hunted by trained assassins. Tazuna paled, a sheen of cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He opened his mouth to protest, to bluster, to lie. But the words died in his throat. The boy, the strange, quiet boy with the ancient eyes, had seen right through him. Kakashi's eye curved into a grim smile. Well, it seems our little genin is more perceptive than he looks. He turned his gaze to Tazuna, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. You have some explaining to do, Tazuna-san. And I suggest you do it quickly. The bridge builder, his bravado shattered, collapsed to his knees, his story tumbling out in a torrent of guilt and desperation. He told them of Gato's tyranny, of the hope that the bridge represented for his people, of the assassins that had been sent after him. He had lied about the mission's rank because he couldn't afford to pay for a B rank or higher. He had been gambling with their lives, and he knew it. Sakura was aghast. Sasuke was disgusted. But Naruto simply nodded, as if this was the only logical outcome. The mission parameters have changed, he said, stating the obvious with a finality that brooked no argument. The objective remains the same: protect the client and ensure the completion of the bridge. Kakashi looked at his team. He was obligated, by shinobi regulations, to return to the village and report the change in mission rank. But he also saw the look in his students' eyes. Sasuke's, a burning desire to test his skills against a real opponent. Sakura's, a mixture of fear and a desperate desire not to be seen as a coward. And Naruto's was a calm, unwavering resolve that was far older than his 12 years. All right, Kakashi said, a sigh escaping his lips. Team 7 will continue the mission. But be on your guard. We are now in enemy territory. They didn't have to wait long. Naruto had felt the disturbance in the environment minutes before it happened. Two distinct chakra signatures, hidden in the trees, their intent a discordant, screeching note in the otherwise harmonious symphony of the forest. He had also noticed the puddle. It was a clear, sunny day, and it hadn't rained in a week. A puddle was a physical impossibility, a tear in the fabric of the natural world. It was an amateurish mistake, but one that most genin would have overlooked. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said, his voice a low whisper. 2 hostiles, 30 meters ahead, sub-jonin level, chakra nature, water. Kakashi's visible eye widened in surprise. His own senses had just picked them up. Naruto's sensory capabilities were astounding. He gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. The attack came as expected. 2 figures erupted from the puddle, their chains lashing out towards Tazuna. But they never reached their target. A wall of solid, shimmering fire, so hot that it distorted the very air around it, erupted from the ground, blocking their path. It was a flawless, instantaneous Kaiden jutsu, performed without a single hand seal. The two attackers, the demon brothers of the hidden mist, stared in stunned silence at the wall of flame. They had expected to face a single Jonin and 3 green genin. They had not expected this. Sasuke and Sakura were equally stunned. They hadn't even seen Naruto move. One moment he was walking beside them, the next, he was standing in front of Tazuna, his hand outstretched, a calm, almost bored expression on his face. "Your technique is inefficient," Naruto said, his voice echoing in the sudden, ringing silence. "Ambushes are predicated on the element of surprise. By using such a conspicuous hiding place, you surrendered that advantage before the battle even began." The demon brothers, their professional pride wounded, snarled and charged. They were met not with a counterattack, but with a simple, elegant display of taijutsu. Naruto moved like a phantom, a whisper of motion. He didn't block their strikes. He simply wasn't there when they landed. He flowed around them, a river of motion, his hands a blur as he struck at pressure points, at nerve clusters, at the delicate, intricate machinery of the human body. He wasn't fighting them. He was deconstructing them. The fight was over in less than 10 seconds. The two formidable chunin lay on the ground, unconscious, their chakra systems completely shut down. There was not a single scratch on Naruto. Kakashi let out a low whistle. Sasuke's fists were clenched so tightly that his knuckles were white. Sakura's mouth was agape. "Naruto," Kakashi said, his voice a mixture of awe and concern. "When did you learn medical ninjutsu of that level?" "I read a scroll," Naruto replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He turned his gaze to Tazuna, who was staring at him with a mixture of terror and gratitude. "The threat level has now been confirmed. The next attacker will likely be a Jonin. We should proceed with extreme caution." And so they continued. The atmosphere on the team irrevocably changed. Sasuke's simmering resentment for Naruto had now been joined by a grudging, infuriating respect. Sakura's confusion had deepened into a dawning, bewildering sense of awe, and Kakashi was beginning to realize that he was in the presence of a prodigy so far beyond anything he had ever encountered that the word, genius, was an insult. They arrived in the land of waves, a place as bleak and desolate as Tazuna's stories had painted it. The air was thick with the smell of salt and decay. The people were gaunt, their eyes hollow with despair. It was a land that had had its soul ripped out, a place where hope had died. And it was here, on a foggy, mist-shrouded path, that they met him. Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the hidden mist. He was a terrifying figure, his face wrapped in bandages, his eyes cold and dead, a massive, cleaver-like sword strapped to his back. His chakra was a monstrous, oppressive weight, a physical presence that seemed to suck the very air from the lungs. Sakura was paralyzed with fear. Even Sasuke, for all his bravado, felt a tremor of true, mortal terror. Kakashi stepped forward, his hand already on his Hitai-8, ready to unveil his Sharingan. "Zabuza Momochi," he said, his voice grim. "It seems Gato is paying you well." Zabuza let out a low, guttural laugh. "Kakashi of the Sharingan, it's an honor. I'll be taking the old man. You can die with the rest of your brats." The battle that followed was a whirlwind of steel, water, and blood. Kakashi and Zabuza were a blur of motion. Two masters of their craft locked in a deadly, elegant dance. Water dragons clashed with lightning blades, and the air was filled with the shriek of metal on metal. But Naruto was not watching the fight. He was watching the trees. His senses, far more acute than even Kakashi's Sharingan, had picked up another presence. A chakra signature so cold, so refined, so perfectly controlled that it was almost invisible. It was a beautiful signature, in its own way. A melody of ice and sorrow, a song of pure, unwavering devotion. He traced it to its source, a slender figure in a hunter-nin mask. Perched silently on a high branch. He knew, with an absolute certainty, that this was Zabuza's partner. He knew that they were waiting for the opportune moment to strike, to intervene. And he knew that he had to stop them. Without a word, he vanished. He reappeared on the branch next to the hunter-nin, his movements so silent, so utterly devoid of presence, that the other shinobi didn't even register his arrival until he spoke. "Your chakra control is exquisite," Naruto said, his voice a calm, appreciative murmur. The precision is remarkable. You have suppressed your presence to a near-zero emission state. Most impressive. The hunter nin whirled around, chunin needles already in their hand, their body tensed, ready to strike. But they froze. The boy in front of them, he was radiating an aura of such profound, unnerving calm that it was like standing in the eye of a hurricane. His blue eyes seemed to see not just their physical form, but the very essence of their being. Who are you? The voice that came from behind the mask was soft, melodic, and unmistakably feminine. I am Naruto Uzumaki, he replied simply. And you are Haku. The hunter nin flinched. Her name. He knew her name. How? Your chakra signature is unique, Naruto explained, his gaze analytical, yet not unkind. It has a distinct, tragic beauty. Like a flower encased in ice. It sings a song of unwavering devotion to a single, destructive purpose. To Zabuza-san. Haku was speechless. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever looked at her and seen anything other than Zabuza's tool, a disposable weapon. This boy, he saw her. He saw her soul. Down below, the battle had reached its climax. Kakashi, trapped in Zabuza's water prison jutsu, was on the verge of drowning. Uke and Sakura were desperately trying to formulate a plan, their attacks useless against the powerful Mist Nin. I cannot allow you to interfere, Naruto said, his voice still calm, but with an undercurrent of unshakable resolve. My mission is to protect my client. Your mission is to protect your master. Our objectives are in direct conflict. Haku's training took over. She was a weapon. She had a purpose. She lunged forward. A flurry of Senbon needles aimed at Naruto's vital points. What happened next was, for Haku, a complete and utter breakdown of everything she thought she knew about the art of shinobi combat. Naruto didn't dodge. He didn't block. He simply moved his body in a series of subtle, almost imperceptible shifts, and every single one of her needles missed its mark. It was as if he knew where they were going before she had even thrown them. He then reached out, his fingers moving with a surgeon's precision, and tapped her on the shoulder. And Haku's world went dark. When she awoke, she was lying on the forest floor, her body completely paralyzed. The boy, Naruto, was sitting cross-legged in front of her, a thoughtful expression on his face. I have temporarily disrupted the flow of chakra to your nervous system, he explained, as if he were discussing the weather. It is not permanent. You will regain full mobility in approximately 1 hour. Down below, the sounds of battle had changed. She could hear Sasuke and Sakura, their voices filled with a new, desperate courage, as they executed a brilliant, multi-layered plan to free their sensei. A plan that was so complex, so perfectly timed, that it couldn't possibly have been conceived by 2 terrified genin on the fly. It was a plan that had been given to them. You told them what to do, Haku whispered, a dawning realization in her voice. Naruto nodded. Their teamwork was inefficient. I provided them with a more optimal strategy. He had projected the plan into their minds, a simple, non-invasive application of his own unique, non-chakra-based energy, a whisper of the phoenix's fire. Haku stared at him, her mind reeling. He had defeated her without a single jutsu, without a single ounce of killing intent. He had outthought a Jonin-level strategist like Zabuza while simultaneously orchestrating his own team's victory. He was impossible. Why? She asked, the question a raw, desperate plea. Why are you not killing me? I am the enemy. Naruto tilted his head, his blue eyes filled with a genuine, ancient curiosity. Death is an inefficient solution to a temporary problem. You are not my enemy, Haku. You are a victim of circumstance. A beautiful, powerful soul shackled to a flawed and self-destructive ideology. He stood up, his gaze drifting towards the battle on the bridge, which was now reaching its conclusion. Kakashi, freed from the prison, was pressing his advantage against a winded and surprised Zabuza. Zabuza-san believes that to be a shinobi is to be a tool, Naruto continued, his voice soft, almost hypnotic. He believes that strength is the only thing that matters. He is wrong. A tool has no purpose of its own. It is defined by the hand that wields it. But you, Haku, you are not a tool. You are the hand. You have the power to choose, to define your own purpose. And then he was gone. The rest of the battle played out as a foregone conclusion. Zabuza, defeated and at Kakashi's mercy, was killed by Haku, who had regained her mobility just in time to play her part, carrying her master away in a feigned display of Hunter Nin protocol. Team 7 was left shaken, but victorious. Kakashi, exhausted from his use of the Sharingan, collapsed, and they were forced to take refuge in Tezuna's home. For the next week, as they guarded the bridge builder and trained, a new dynamic emerged within the team. Kakashi, recovering from his chakra exhaustion, taught Sasuke and Sakura the art of tree climbing, a basic chakra control exercise. Naruto, who had mastered the concept within seconds, spent his time elsewhere. He would disappear for hours on end, only to return with a strange, serene smile on his face. He was communing with the land, with the very life force of the planet. He was a refugee in a new, vibrant universe, and he was drinking in its essence, his own fragmented power slowly, imperceptibly, beginning to heal. But he was also thinking about Haku. He had felt the purity of her soul, the fierce, unwavering loyalty that she possessed. It was a beautiful, powerful thing, but it was being channeled into a destructive, self-defeating path. He saw in her a kindred spirit, a being defined by a singular, all-consuming purpose. His own purpose had been to oversee the cycle of creation and destruction. Hers was to serve as Zabuza's weapon. But he was learning that there was more to existence than a single, grand purpose. There was choice, and he wanted, with a strange, unfamiliar sense of urgency, to show that to her. The final confrontation on the bridge was inevitable. Zabuza and Haku returned, their intentions clear. But this time, Naruto was ready. As Kakashi engaged Zabuza in a final, desperate battle, Naruto found himself facing Haku once more. She stood before him, her demeanor colder, more resolute. She had made her choice. She was Zabuza's tool, and she would die for him if she had to. She unleashed her clan's secret jutsu, the demonic ice mirrors. A dome of ice surrounded Naruto, Haku's reflection visible in every single one. She was a blur of motion, a phantom of ice and steel, her Senbon needles raining down on him from all directions. Inside the ice dome, the temperature plummeted. Naruto stood in the center, his eyes closed. He was not tracking her with his sight. He was tracking her with his soul. He could feel her, the beautiful, tragic song of her chakra, a melody of sorrow and devotion. "This jutsu is your heart, isn't it, Haku?" he said, his voice echoing in the crystalline prison. "A beautiful, perfect cage. You trap your opponents in here. But you are also trapped. You have imprisoned yourself in your devotion to Zabuza." Haku's attacks faltered for a fraction of a second. He understood. He understood her in a way that no one, not even Zabuza, ever could. "Let me show you what true freedom is," Naruto said. And then, he unleashed his own power. It was not a jutsu. It was not chakra. It was something older, something more fundamental. A wave of pure, golden energy, the color of a newborn star, radiated from him. It was not hot. It was not destructive. It was life. The ice dome did not shatter. It melted, not from heat, but from a gentle, irresistible persuasion. The ice, a substance of cold and death, simply ceased to be in the face of such overwhelming, primordial life. Haku was thrown back, not by the force of the blast, but by the sheer, breathtaking beauty of it. She stared at Naruto, who now stood in the center of the bridge, bathed in a soft, golden light. His whisker marks seemed fainter, his blue eyes so bright that they seemed to contain entire galaxies. He was not a boy. He was not a shinobi. He was something else. Something ancient, and powerful, and beautiful. At that moment, on the other side of the bridge, Zabuza had fallen. Kakashi stood over him, his hand crackling with the lethal energy of the Reikiri, poised to deliver the final blow. And Haku did what she had always been trained to do. She moved. She became the shield. She threw herself in front of Kakashi's attack, a final, perfect act of devotion. But the blow never landed. A hand, radiating that same, gentle golden light, caught Kakashi's wrist, stopping the unstoppable jutsu in its tracks. Naruto stood between them, his expression serene, his eyes filled with a profound, heartbreaking sadness. He looked at Haku, at the look of stunned surprise on her face. "Your life is your own, Haku," he said softly. "It is not a tool to be discarded." He then turned to Zabuza, who was staring at the scene, his cold, cynical heart shaken to its very core. And at that moment, Gato and his army of thugs arrived, their laughter echoing across the bridge. The shipping magnate, seeing his too expensive shinobi defeated, had decided to cut his losses and finish the job himself. Well, Zabuza, Gato sneered. You're not so tough after all. You're broken. I'm voiding our contract. Zabuza didn't even look at him. He was staring at Haku, who was staring at Naruto. He was seeing the girl he had picked up in the snow, the child he had turned into a perfect, unfeeling weapon, looking at this strange golden boy with an expression of hope. Something inside Zabuza, something he thought had died a long time ago, broke. Tears streamed from his eyes, mixing with the blood on his face. Naruto turned to face the army of thugs, his golden aura slowly fading. He looked at them, at their crude weapons, at their cruel, greedy faces. And for the first time since his arrival in this universe, the ancient cosmic being within him felt a flicker of true, righteous anger. He raised a single hand. A sphere of swirling, incandescent energy, a miniature, captured star, formed in his palm. It was not a Rasengan. It was something far, far older. You have disrupted the harmony of this world for too long, he said, his voice no longer the calm, melodic tone of a boy, but a deep, resonant chorus of 1,000 dying stars. It is time for you to be corrected. The blast of light was silent, but absolute. It did not burn. It did not explode. It simply, unmade. Gato and his army were erased from existence. Their atoms scattered to the four winds, their discordant, ugly noise silenced forever. In the ringing silence that followed, Naruto turned back to Zabuza and Haku. His eyes were once again the clear, calm blue of a genin from Konoha. The mission is complete, he said. Zabuza, the demon of the hidden mist, a man who had killed hundreds without a flicker of remorse, knelt on the ground and wept. He wept for the monster he had become, for the child he had almost destroyed. And he wept for the strange, impossible boy who had shown him that even a demon could find redemption. Haku simply stared at Naruto, her heart a whirlwind of emotions she didn't even have names for. He had saved her. He had saved Zabuza. He had saved her soul. She didn't know it yet, but in that moment, on that blood-soaked bridge, a new song had begun to play in her heart. A song not of ice and sorrow, but of gold and light. A song of the boy who was so much more than a boy. The boy who was a refugee from a dead universe, a god in mortal form. The boy who was her future. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Echoes of a Steel Garden. The return to Konohagakure was a discordant symphony. The familiar scent of damp earth, sun-warmed wood, and the distant, savory aroma of cooking from 1,000 homes should have been a welcoming harmony. But for Naruto, it was overlaid with a cacophony of new, jarring notes. The stars they received were no longer just the dull, persistent thrum of hatred he had grown accustomed to. Now, there was a sharp, piercing screech of fear. The whispers that followed them through the gates were not the usual insults, but fragmented, terrified reports of a golden demon, a silent light, an army of men erased from the world. The story of the great Naruto bridge had preceded them, twisted and magnified into a legend of monstrous power. For the villagers, the demon fox they had always feared had finally shown its face. For Naruto, it was simply noisy. Their debriefing was not held in the third Hokage's warm, sunlit office, but in the sterile, windowless heart of the Anbu headquarters. The air was cold, recycled, and carried the metallic tang of polished steel and antiseptic. It was a place designed to strip away comfort and pretension, a room of stark truths and hard shadows. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, was there, his face a mask of grandfatherly concern that did not quite conceal the deep, troubled lines around his eyes. But he was not the one in charge. The seat of power, both literally and figuratively, was occupied by Tsunade. She sat opposite them, a titan of a woman clad in the severe, functional gray of the Anbu commander's uniform. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense ponytail, and her face, unadorned by makeup, was a study in controlled, cynical power. Her eyes, the color of aged whiskey, missed nothing. They dissected Kakashi's report with a surgeon's precision, lingered on Sasuke's defiant pride and Sakura's nervous awe, and then, finally, they settled on Naruto. It was not a gaze of hatred. It was something far more unnerving. It was the look of a scientist studying a completely new, unknown, and potentially world-altering phenomenon. A silent, non-explosive blast of energy that disintegrated over 100 armed men without leaving a trace, she said, her voice a low, dangerous purr. She steepled her fingers, her nails immaculate, her knuckles scarred from 1,000 battles. You will forgive my skepticism, Kakashi. The report reads less like a mission summary and more like a child's fairy tale. Kakashi, for the first time since Naruto had known him, seemed genuinely on edge. Commander, I saw it with my own eyes. It was not a jutsu. It was something else. Tsunade's gaze flickered back to Naruto, hoo-ha. D remained silent throughout the entire debriefing, his hands resting calmly in his lap. And you, Naruto Uzumaki, what do you have to say for yourself? What did you do on that bridge? I restored balance, Naruto said, his voice echoing slightly in the acoustically dead room. The statement was so simple, so utterly devoid of arrogance, that it was all the more shocking. A muscle in Tsunade's jaw twitched. Balance, she repeated, the word dripping with sarcasm. You annihilated a small army and you call it balance. They were a discordant element, Naruto explained, his blue eyes meeting. Her hardened gaze without a flicker of fear. Their existence was predicated on the suffering of others. They introduced chaos into a closed system. I corrected the equation. Hiruzen Sarutobi let out a weary sigh. The sound of a man who felt the weight of his hat more than ever. Naruto, we need to understand. What is this power? Is it the Kyuubi? Naruto considered the question, not as an accusation, but as a genuine, if flawed, inquiry. He could feel the maelstrom of angry, red chakra sealed within him, a raging, sentient furnace of hatred and loneliness. It was a powerful, chaotic energy, but it was primitive. A sledgehammer in a world of scalpels. The power he had used was something different. It was the whisper of a memory, a flicker of his true self. The Nine Tails is a localized anomaly. A concentration of raw, unfocused energy, Naruto said, his vocabulary once again making his teammates stare at him in bewilderment. What I used was a fundamental principle. The law of conservation of energy is not absolute. Matter can be unmade, returned to its constituent, non-sentient parts. The silence that followed was so profound that Naruto could hear the faint, 60-cycle hum of the electrical conduits in the walls. Tsunade stared at him, her formidable intellect grappling with the implications of what he had just said. He spoke of universal laws as if he had written them. He was not a weapon. He was a walking, talking existential threat. He is to be monitored, Tsunade said finally, her voice cold and decisive, 24 hours a day. A full sensory detail. His teammates are to report any and all unusual activity. His participation in the upcoming chunin exams is under review. She stood, her presence filling the room. Dismissed. As they left the cold, sterile heart of Anbu, Naruto could feel the new set of eyes on him. 3 of them, hidden. Their chakra signatures were muted, suppressed, but he could feel their faint, curious hum. Tsunade's watchdogs. He found the entire situation inefficient. Their surveillance was based on the flawed assumption that he was a shinobi who could be tracked by his chakra. It was like trying to track a hurricane by listening for its footsteps. In the days that followed, Konoha buzzed with the energy of the impending chunin exams. Shinobi from every nation filled the streets, a vibrant, chaotic tapestry of different cultures, different loyalties, and different ambitions. For Sasuke, it was a chance to test his power against the best of his generation. For Sakura, it was a terrifying, exhilarating new challenge. For Naruto, it was an opportunity to observe. He saw the intricate web of alliances and rivalries, the political posturing, the seething ambition and the gnawing fear. It was a microcosm of the conflicts that had defined this world for centuries. A fascinating, if tragically repetitive, pattern. It was during one of his observation sessions, as he sat on a training post watching the intricate dance of a dozen different sparring matches, that Ino Yamanaka found him again. She didn't march up to him this time. She approached with a quiet, predatory grace, her aqua eyes narrowed in concentration. The rumors about him, combined with her own memories of his impossible performance in the academy, had coalesced into an all-consuming obsession. You're creating a lot of waves, Naruto, she said, her voice a low, conspiratorial murmur. Waves are a natural product of displaced energy, he replied, his gaze not leaving the sparring genin below. Ino gritted her teeth. The same infuriating, literal calm. I'm not talking about physics. I'm talking about you. The bridge. The army that vanished. People are scared of you. Fear is an irrational response to an unknown variable, he said. Once the variable is understood, fear is replaced by either acceptance or nullification. She had had enough of his cryptic pronouncements. She was a Yamanaka. Her family were the masters of the mind. She would get her answers one way or another. Hold still, she whispered, her hands flashing through a single, practiced hand seal. Mind-body switch technique. It was a foolish, reckless move, born of pure frustration. She had expected to find something. The Kyuubi's rage, a hidden, arrogant personality. The secrets to his jutsu. What she found was God. Her consciousness, a tiny, flickering spark, was not inside a boy's mind. It was adrift in a silent, endless ocean of stars. She saw galaxies being born in fiery, incandescent bursts of light. She saw black holes, silent, hungry mouths in the fabric of space-time, devouring entire solar systems. She heard a symphony, not of sound, but of pure, crystalline mathematics, the elegant, beautiful equations that governed the birth and death of universes. And she felt a loneliness so profound, so absolute, that it was a physical weight, a crushing, heartbreaking sorrow that had lasted for eons. She saw a single, magnificent creature of pure, living flame, a being the size of a nebula, watching its own universe die. And then she was falling with that dying star, into a world of green and blue. Ino's consciousness snapped back into her own body with the force of a physical blow. She stumbled backwards, gasping for air, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a terror and an awe so profound that she couldn't even speak. She looked at Naruto, who had not moved, who was now looking at her, his head tilted in that same, curious gesture. Your mind is a beautiful, intricate garden, Ino, he said, his voice soft, gentle. But you should be careful which doors you try to open. Some lead to places that a mind like yours is not yet ready to comprehend. She didn't say a word. She just turned and fled. But as she ran, the terror was slowly being replaced by something else. Something magnetic. She had seen the truth. The boy on the swing set, the quiet enigma, the golden demon, he was something more. Something vast, and ancient, and utterly, heartbreakingly alone. And in that moment, her rivalry, her obsession, it all melted away, replaced by a fierce, inexplicable desire to understand. To connect. Meanwhile, in a secure, heavily warded medical facility, Haku was experiencing her own paradigm shift. She had been separated from Zabuza, who was undergoing interrogation by Konoha's torture and interrogation force. She, on the other hand, was a patient, a subject of study. The shinobi of Konoha were fascinated by her Kekkei Genkei, the rare and powerful ice release. But she was not a prisoner. She was treated with a quiet, professional courtesy. And every day, he would visit her. Naruto would bring her books. Not on jutsu or shinobi history, but on botany, on poetry, on the art of ink-wash painting. He would sit with her for hours, not saying much, but his calm, serene presence was a balm to her shattered soul. He never spoke of the bridge. He never spoke of Zabuza. He spoke of the beauty of a single, perfectly formed ice crystal. He spoke of the concept of wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection and transience. He was teaching her something that Zabuza never could. He was teaching her how to be a person. You are not defined by your abilities, Haku, he told her one afternoon, as they sat by a window overlooking a small, meticulously maintained garden. A flow. Wr is not beautiful because it is useful. It is beautiful simply because it is. Your power is a part of you. It does not have to be your only purpose. Haku looked down at her hands, the hands that had killed. The hands that had served as a perfect, unthinking tool. For the first time, she was beginning to see them as her own. And she looked at the boy beside her, the boy who radiated a light that had nothing to do with the sun. Her devotion, that powerful, all-consuming force that had defined her entire life, was beginning to shift its anchor. It was no longer a chain, binding her to a life of darkness. It was becoming a thread. A shimmering, golden thread, that connected her to him. The universe, however, had other plans. It was during one of his nights of quiet contemplation, as he sat on the head of the fourth Hokage on the monument, that Naruto felt it. A flicker, a pulse of energy from the far north, in the direction of the Land of Iron. It was not chakra. It was not natural energy. It was something else. Something familiar. It was the faint, distorted echo of a technology so advanced that it bordered on the magical. It was the hum of a power source that was not based on fusion or fission, but on something far more elegant. It was a whisper from a world that was not his own, but was closer to the one he had lost than anything he had yet encountered in this strange, new reality. He was not the only one who noticed it. The next morning, Team 7 was summoned once again to the Anbu headquarters. This time, the atmosphere was not one of interrogation, but of tense, urgent briefing. A unique energy signature has been detected emanating from the Land of Iron, Tsunade said, pointing to a large map. A single, pulsing red dot marked a remote, mountainous region. It is not chakra. Our analysts are baffled. It appeared 2 weeks ago, shortly after your return from the Land of Waves. Her eyes narrowed on Naruto. A coincidence, I'm sure. She continued. The Land of Iron is neutral territory. We cannot send an army. But we cannot ignore this. We need a small, deniable reconnaissance team to investigate the source of this energy. Given your team's recent performance in unorthodox situations, she said, her voice laced with dry irony, and Naruto's demonstrated analytical abilities, you have been selected. You're sending us on a secret A-rank mission right before the chunin exams. Kakashi asked, his visible eye wide. The exams are the perfect cover, Tsunade countered. Everyone is focused on Konoha. No one will notice a single genin team slipping out for a few days. She threw a scroll onto the table. Your escort will be my best sensory nin. You will find the source of this energy. You will identify it. You will not engage. You will simply observe. Am I understood? The journey north was a blur of speed and silence. Their escort, an Anbu agent with the codename Weasel, was as silent and ephemeral as his namesake, his presence a mere whisper in the wind. They traveled through dense, primordial forests, over snow-capped mountains, into the heart of the Land of Iron, a country of stark, windswept beauty and a culture of rigid, stoic honor. The energy signature grew stronger as they approached, a low, persistent hum on the edge of Naruto's perception. It was a siren song of a forgotten age, a melody of advanced science and unimaginable power. He felt a strange sense of nostalgia, a longing for a world of clean lines, of elegant machinery, of a universe that operated on principles that he understood. They found the source in a remote, blizzard-racked valley, hidden behind a waterfall of frozen ice. It was a door, a massive, circular door made of a dull, gray metal that was not forged, but grown. There were no seams, no hinges, no handles. Only a single, intricate symbol in the center, a design that was both alien and hauntingly familiar. This technology is ancient, Kakashi breathed, his Sharingan eye spinning as he tried to analyze the door's composition. It's not made of any known metal. It doesn't seem to have a power source, yet, it's humming. Naruto stepped forward, his hand outstretched. He did not touch the door. He simply reached out to it with his consciousness. He could feel the intricate, dormant systems within, the quiet, patient hum of a machine that had been waiting for millennia. He found the locking mechanism. Not a physical tumbler, but a quantum entanglement key, a lock that required not a key, but a specific, unique energy signature to open. An energy signature that was not chakra. An energy signature, like his own. He focused a minuscule, infinitesimal fraction of his own life force, the golden fire of the phoenix, and directed it at the symbol. The door responded. The symbol glowed with a soft, crimson light. With a hiss of depressurizing atmosphere, the massive metal iris spiraled open, revealing a dark, cavernous space beyond. The air that washed over them was stale, sterile, and cold, the air of a tomb. A tomb filled with the ghosts of a forgotten science. They stepped inside, their footsteps echoing in the vast, silent darkness. Emergency lights flickered to life, casting long, dancing shadows. They were in a massive, cylindrical chamber. The walls were lined with banks of dead computer terminals, their screens dark and lifeless. Wires and conduits, thick as anacondas, snaked across the floor and ceiling. It was a cathedral of a dead technology, a steel garden where nothing had grown for a very, very long time. And in the center of the chamber, dominating the space, was a single, massive stasis pod. It was made of the same seamless, gray metal, but with a large, transparent panel in the front. It was filled with a thick, bubbling, amniotic fluid that glowed with a faint, crimson light. And suspended within that fluid, as still and perfect as a doll, was a woman. She had long, bushy brown hair, a pair of spectacles perched on her nose, and a white lab coat over a blue dress. Her features were delicate, intelligent, beautiful. But there was something else. Peeking out from behind her, almost hidden in the crimson glow, was a tail. A pink, segmented tail with a black tip. And her ears, though mostly obscured by her hair, were distinctly pointed. As they approached, the humming of the machinery grew louder. The crimson light in the pod began to pulse, faster and faster. Like a waking heart, on a monitor above the pod, a single line of alien text flickered to life, a language that no one in the elemental nations could possibly comprehend. But Naruto could. He didn't read the words. He felt them. It was a diagnostic report. A status update. Subject: Android 21. Status: dormant. Bioenergy levels: critical. External energy source detected. High compatibility match. Initiating emergency awakening protocol. The crimson light in the pod flashed, turning from a soft glow to a blinding, angry red. The fluid began to drain. The woman's eyes, hidden behind her spectacles, snapped open. They glowed with an intense, hungry, magenta light. A voice, feminine, intelligent, but with a strange, dissonant undercurrent of something wild and predatory, echoed through the chamber. Not from the pod, but from everywhere at once. Oh my, it seems I have some visitors. I was getting so terribly hungry. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Hunger of a Crimson Star. The voice was not a sound. It was a presence. It permeated the steel and shadow cathedral of the laboratory, vibrating in the hollow spaces of their bones, a silken, intelligent, and utterly ravenous whisper that bypassed the ears and imprinted itself directly onto the mind. For Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura, it was a predator's purr that sent a cascade of ice-cold adrenaline through their systems. The Anbu agent, Weasel, became one with the deepest shadows, his chakra signature all but ceasing to exist. But for Naruto, the voice was a familiar echo, a distorted harmony from a song he had long forgotten. It was the sound of a being whose very existence was defined by the consumption of energy, a concept as alien to this world of chakra as fire was to the vacuum of space. From the central stasis pod, the crimson light pulsed like a malevolent heart, casting the chamber in a hellish, rhythmic glow. The amniotic fluid, thick and viscous, drained away with a series of pneumatic hisses, revealing the woman within. She took a single, shuddering breath, the first in what could have been millennia, and her magenta eyes, glowing with an internal, predatory light, focused with an unnerving, instantaneous precision. They swept past the tense forms of Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura, dismissing them as one might dismiss pieces of furniture. They did not even register the deeper shadow where Weasel was concealed. Her gaze landed on Naruto, and stopped. The world, for her, narrowed to a single point of incandescent, golden light. All other sensory input became irrelevant noise. With a motion that was too fluid, too silent for a living creature, she stepped from the pod. Her bare feet made no sound on the metallic floor. The lab coat clung to her lithe, deceptively delicate frame, and her bushy brown hair framed a face of stunning, intellectual beauty. Her spectacles glinted in the crimson light, but they could not hide the raw, terrifying hunger in her eyes. Her pink, segmented tail swished gently behind her, an indicator of a placid curiosity that was utterly at odds with the aura of palpable menace she projected. She began to circle him, a shark circling a shipwrecked sailor. Her movements were a perfect, economic ballet of predation. She was not walking, she was flowing. Fascinating, she murmured, her voice now an audible, melodic contralto that did nothing to diminish its unsettling quality. She tapped a thoughtful finger against her lips. The energy signatures in this facility are quaint. The silver-haired one, she gestured dismissively towards Kakashi, his is sharp, focused. Like a lemon drop, a momentary zest, but ultimately unsatisfying. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed, his hand already forming the seals for a chidori, the chirping of lightning a low, angry growl in the silence. Her gaze shifted to Sasuke. The dark-haired one. Ah, interesting. There's a bitterness there, a cold, dark chocolate flavor. And something else, a potential for a higher energy state, but it's locked away. Dormant, an unripened fruit. Sasuke's teeth were gritted so hard his jaw ached. The casual, condescending analysis of his power, of his very being, was an ensue. LT more profound than any taunt he had ever received. The girl is barely a morsel, she continued, her eyes glancing at Sakura for a fleeting moment. Strawberry bubblegum, all sweet scent and no substance. And there's a fourth, hiding in the dark, a ghost, practically calorie-free. Finally, her glowing magenta eyes returned to Naruto. A slow, genuine smile spread across her lips, a smile that was both beautiful and terrifying. It was the smile of a starving woman looking upon an infinite banquet. But you, she breathed, the word a lover's sigh. Oh, you are exquisite. You are not a snack. You are a feast. You are a star, a glorious, golden, self-renewing, all-you-can-eat buffet of cosmic proportions. The energy signature, it's impossible. It violates the known laws of thermodynamics. She's a perpetual motion machine of life itself. How are you real? The scientist in her was captivated. The monster was drooling. Suddenly, her form flickered. For a single, terrifying instant, her skin turned bubblegum pink. The whites of her eyes became black, and a wild, manic grin stretched her face into a horrifying parody of joy. The shift was so fast that if they had blinked, they would have missed it. The predatory aura in the room intensified 100-fold. She reached out and touched the console next to her stasis pod. The ancient, dead metal shimmered, its molecular structure rearranging itself under her touch. In a swirl of pink light, the console transformed into a perfect, frosted chocolate cupcake, complete with a cherry on top. She picked it up, sniffed it delicately, and took a bite. Delicious, she said, her voice momentarily deeper, more guttural. But I crave something more, substantial. Her magenta eyes locked back onto Naruto. That was the breaking point. This was not a shinobi. This was not a jutsu. This was an abomination, a creature that warped the very laws of reality. Now, Kakashi barked. He moved first, his body a blur of motion, the high-pitched shriek of the Chidori filling the chamber. He thrust his hand, a blade of pure lightning, directly at the woman's heart. Simultaneously, Sasuke exhaled a massive fireball, a gout of Uchiha flame that roared across the chamber. Intending to engulf her, Sakura, her fear momentarily eclipsed by her loyalty, threw a dozen kunai with explosive tags attached, a spread designed to box her in. It was a perfectly executed, multi-pronged attack by an elite shinobi and two prodigy genin. It should have been devastating. It was utterly, pathetically, useless. The woman, Android 21, didn't even bother to look at the kunai. They clattered harmlessly against an invisible energy barrier around her body, the explosive tags failing to detonate. She turned her head towards Sasuke's great fireball technique, opened her mouth, and inhaled. The massive inferno, a jutsu that could incinerate a small forest, was drawn into her mouth as if it were a strand of spaghetti, disappearing without a trace. Spicy, she commented, a small puff of smoke escaping her lips. I like it. Then she turned her attention to Kakashi's Chidori. As the lightning-clad hand was about to impale her, she simply held out her own hand, palm open. She did not block the attack. She caught it. The lethal, piercing energy of the Chidori flowed into her palm, absorbed as easily as a sponge soaking up water. The chirping sound died with a pathetic whimper. Kakashi's eyes, both the normal one and the Sharingan, were wide with disbelief. His ultimate assassination technique had been eaten. Such a waste of good energy, 21 sighed. A flicker of genuine disappointment in her voice. And then she moved. She was not a blur. She simply ceased to be where she was and appeared in front of him. Before Kakashi could even process the impossible speed, she tapped him on the forehead with a single, delicate finger. The copy ninja, the veteran of 100 battles, the legendary Kakashi of the Sharingan, crumpled to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. Unconscious before he even hit the floor. One down, 21 said, a playful lilt in her voice. Sasuke, his pride and his Uchiha blood screaming in outrage, charged, his Sharingan spinning. Tracking her every move, he lashed out with a taijutsu sequence that was fast, precise, and deadly. It was like watching a hummingbird attack a statue of solid diamond. 21 simply tilted her head, sidestepped, and weaved, avoiding his strikes with an effortless grace. She wasn't even looking at him. Her eyes were still fixed on Naruto. "You're getting in the way of my dinner," she said, her voice laced with annoyance. She flicked a finger at Sasuke's chest. The impact, though it looked gentle, sent him flying across the chamber, crashing into a bank of computers with a sickening crunch of metal and bone. He lay there, groaning, his body broken and his pride shattered. Sakura, her face a mask of terror, stood frozen, her mind unable to comprehend the sheer, overwhelming difference in power. This wasn't a fight, it was an execution. 21 began to walk towards Naruto again, her path now clear. "Now," she said, her voice dropping back to that hungry, seductive purr. "Where were we? Ah, yes, the feast." Throughout the entire, one-sided conflict, Naruto had not moved. He had not flinched. He had not prepared a jutsu. He had simply watched. He had analyzed. He had seen the way her body moved, the way her energy flared and receded. He had seen the flicker of her transformation, the brief but telling war between the calm, curious scientist and the ravenous, joyful monster. He had understood. This was not an enemy to be fought. This was a system out of balance. A beautiful, complex equation with a single, critical flaw. "Your cellular structure is in a state of degenerative apoptosis," Naruto said. His voice calm and clear, cutting through the tense atmosphere like a scalpel. "The energy you consume is not being used to sustain you. It's being used to counteract a cascading system failure. A flaw in your design." Android 21 stopped dead in her tracks. Her head cocked, the predatory gleam in her eyes momentarily replaced by a look of sharp, intellectual surprise. How could you possibly know that?" she asked, her voice losing its predatory edge, replaced by the genuine curiosity of a scientist. "I can see it," Naruto replied simply. "I can see the frantic, inefficient energy conversion happening within you. It's a beautiful, complex system, but the feedback loop is corrupted. You are not hungry for power. You are starving for stability. The more energy you consume, the faster your cells decay, and the more you need to consume. It is an unsustainable paradox." He was speaking her language. Not the language of jutsu, or power levels, or combat. The language of pure, unadulterated science. The scientist in her, the core of her original personality, was enthralled. The monster, however, was getting impatient. Her form flickered again, more intensely this time. "He talks too much." A deeper, more guttural voice seemed to echo from within her. "Just eat him." "Quiet, you," she snapped, clutching her head as a wave of pain washed over her. A war was being fought within her, and she was the battlefield. Naruto took a step forward, a gesture of calm that was so at odds with the situation that it was utterly disarming. "I am Fenikusu," he said, the name a whisper of a forgotten cosmos. "My very essence is the principle of renewal, of rebirth. My energy is not a finite resource to be consumed. It is a self-sustaining, self-regulating system. A stable star in a universe of dying planets." He was offering her a truth she had never considered. A solution she had never dreamed of. The scientist in her looked at him with dawning, world-shattering awe. The monster saw an even more enticing meal. "I need to study you," she whispered, her scientific curiosity winning out for the moment. "I need to understand. I need a sample." "No," the monster's voice growled from within. "We need it all." Her body began to tremble, her hands clenching and unclenching. The hunger was becoming unbearable, a physical agony that threatened to overwhelm her rational mind. "Then let us conduct an experiment," Naruto said, his voice holding a note of command that was as absolute as it was gentle. He held out his hand, palm up. "I will give you what you need," he said. "Not a meal to be devoured, but a current to stabilize your system. A taste of equilibrium." Sakura, who had managed to crawl over to Sasuke's broken form, stared in horror. "Naruto, no, she'll kill you." Even the hidden Anbu shifted, his orders to observe warring with the instinct to intervene in what was clearly a suicidal act. Android 21 stared at his outstretched hand, her breathing ragged. It was a trap. It had to be a trap. But the calm, unwavering certainty in his ancient blue eyes, it was more compelling than any promise, more tempting than any feast. The scientist in saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for discovery. The monster saw a free sample. For the first time since her awakening, both sides of her were in agreement. An experiment, she breathed, her eyes trembling with a mixture of hope and ravenous anticipation. She slowly, hesitantly, reached out and placed her hand over his. The moment their skin touched, the universe held its breath. Naruto closed his eyes and focused. A single, infinitesimally small thread of pure, golden energy, the color of a newborn star, flowed from his palm into hers. It was not chakra. It was not raw power. It was the essence of life itself. The fundamental principle of rebirth made manifest. For Android 21, the sensation was indescribable. It was not the frantic, temporary rush of consuming a powerful energy attack. It was not the fleeting satisfaction of devouring a living being. This was peace. It was a warm, gentle current that flowed through her, not just filling the gnawing emptiness, but healing it. It was a golden light that pushed back the screaming, ravenous darkness within her. The cascading failure in her cells slowed, stabilized, and for the first time in her existence, fell silent. The storm was over. A gasp escaped her lips. A sound of pure, unadulterated ecstasy. The malevolent magenta glow in her eyes faded, replaced by the soft, intelligent brown of her original human self. The predatory aura around her vanished, replaced by an aura of profound, overwhelming relief. Her form stabilized, the pink, monstrous flashes ceasing completely. She fell to her knees, still clutching his hand as if it were the only thing holding her to reality. Tears streamed from her newly brown eyes, tracing paths down her cheeks. The hunger, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. It's quiet. She looked up at him, at the calm, serene boy who had just performed a miracle that defied every law of science she had ever known. She was looking at her savior. Her god, her anchor in a sea of madness. Naruto gently withdrew his hand. The paradox is temporarily resolved. But the flaw in your design remains. You will require regular calibration. 21 slowly got to her feet, her composure returning. But her eyes never left his face. The way she looked at him had fundamentally changed. The hunger was gone, but in its place was something far more potent. A mixture of scientific awe, profound gratitude, and a deep, primal, and utterly terrifying level of attachment. My designation is Android 21, she said, her voice now clear, crisp, and perfectly rational. She pushed her spectacles up her nose. A gesture that was endearingly human. I am, a researcher for the Red Ribbon Army. Or, what was left of it. She gestured to the laboratory around them. This was a remote research and development outpost. My primary project was my own cellular reconstruction, using the genetic material of my human template, a brilliant scientist with a son named Gohan, and augmenting it with the CELLs of the most powerful fighters my universe had ever known. My creator, Drive, Jero, designed me to be the ultimate weapon. Her expression darkened, but his computers were flawed. They could not properly integrate the cellular regeneration of a Majin with the rapid growth and power acquisition of a Saiyan. They created me, a being with a near-infinite potential for growth, but with an equally infinite self-destructive cellular appetite. She looked at Naruto, a hint of desperation in her eyes. This facility was thrown through some kind of dimensional rift during a catastrophic event. I put myself into stasis, hoping to halt the degeneration. I have been dormant for, I don't know how long. Your unique energy signature triggered the emergency awakening protocol. It was the first compatible energy source the system had detected since the event. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. A lost universe, a catastrophic event, a refugee, just like him. They were two sides of the same cosmic coin. He was the last ember of a dying fire. She was the ghost of a brilliant, flawed science. The silence was broken by a groan from the other side of the room. Kakashi was stirring, his mind slowly rebooting from the system shock 21 had delivered. A new, infinitely more complex reality had just crashed down upon Team 7. Their simple reconnaissance mission had uncovered a being from another dimension. A creature of unimaginable power, a woman who was both a brilliant scientist and a world-ending threat. And the only thing standing between her and a ravenous, world-consuming rampage was the quiet, enigmatic boy she was now staring at with an expression of absolute, unwavering devotion. In the deepest shadows, Weasel remained perfectly still, his mind reeling. He had his orders: observe and report. But how could he possibly report this? How could he explain to the Hokage, to the formidable Anbu commander Tsunade, that their unpredictable Jinchuriki, their greatest weapon and greatest fear, had just formed a symbiotic, codependent relationship with a dimension-hopping, reality-warping android of terrifying power? The mission was over, but the true chaos was just beginning. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Equation of a Monster. The silence in the Steel Garden was a living entity, thick and heavy with the ghosts of violence and the birth of an impossible allegiance. It was broken by a sharp, ragged gasp. Kakashi Hatake, his mind a maelstrom of rebooting synapses, pushed himself into a sitting position, his single visible eye blinking rapidly as it tried to reconcile the last thing he remembered, the terrifying, beautiful face of a monster, with the scene now before him. The woman, the android, was standing beside Naruto, her posture one of serene, academic curiosity. Her magenta eyes were gone, replaced by a warm, intelligent brown. The oppressive, soul-crushing aura of menace had vanished, leaving behind only the cold, sterile hum of the ancient laboratory. It was a dissonance so profound that for a moment, he thought he was hallucinating, a side effect of whatever she had done to him. Across the chamber, a groan of pure, undiluted agony answered his own. Sasuke Uchiha was pulling himself from the wreckage of a computer console, his arm hanging at an unnatural angle, his face a contorted mask of pain and a humiliation so deep it was a physical wound. His Sharingan was deactivated, but his dark eyes burned with a cold, impotent fury as he stared, not at his attacker, but at Naruto. He had been dismissed, swatted aside like an insect. The legendary Uchiha power, his entire reason for being, had been treated as an insignificant nuisance. And the cause of his shame, the dead last, the Dobi, now stood beside the monster, not as a conqueror, but as its master. The thought was a shard of glass in his soul. Kakashi-sensei, Sasuke-kun. Sakura's voice was a trembling thread in the heavy silence. She was on her knees beside Sasuke, her hands glowing with the faint green light of a hastily performed mystical palm technique, her medical knowledge barely scratching the surface of his injuries. But her eyes, wide with a mixture of terror and a strange, bewildering awe, kept darting back to the calm epicenter of the room, to Naruto, and the woman who now stood so close to him that their shoulders were almost touching. The situation has been neutralized, Naruto stated, his voice cutting through the tension with the precision of a surgeon's blade. It was a ludicrous understatement, yet it was delivered with such unshakable, factual certainty that it momentarily silenced any protest. Kakashi staggered to his feet, his mind racing, trying to fit the impossible events into the rigid framework of shinobi protocol. Threat assessment, damage report, mission objective, all of it had been rendered meaningless. Neutralized, he repeated, his voice raspy. Naruto, it took out two of us and you without breaking a sweat. What in the hell happened? An experiment was conducted. Android 21 answered for him, her voice a pleasant, melodic contralto. She pushed her spectacles up her nose, a disarmingly human gesture. Naruto-kun's unique energy signature has a stabilizing effect on my cellular structure. The less rational aspects of my personality are now in a state of remission. She looked at Naruto, and the sheer, unadulterated adoration in her gaze was more unsettling than her previous hunger. He is, to put it in terms you might understand, my anchor. My living, walking cure. The term of endearment, Naruto-kun, spoken wit. Such easy familiarity by this creature of impossible power, was a dissonant note that made Kakashi's teeth ache. We are taking her back with us, Naruto announced, not as a suggestion, but as the ONLY logical conclusion to an unassailable argument. The statement detonated in the quiet chamber. Absolutely not, Kakashi snapped, his Jonin authority flaring to life. She is an S-class threat, if not higher. She's not from this world. We don't know what she's capable of. My duty is to the village, and that means eliminating a threat of this magnitude. You are making an assumption based on incomplete data, 21 countered coolly. Turning her analytical brown eyes on him. The scientist was now in full control. First, your assertion that you can eliminate me is statistically improbable. Your most powerful energy-based technique, the Chidori, as I recall, registered as little more than a mild static charge. Your probability of success in a second attempt is less than 0.001%. She held up a finger, lecturing. Second, leaving me here is the most irresponsible course of action you could possibly take. While Naruto-kun's energy has stabilized me, the effect is not permanent. I will require regular calibrations. As he so aptly put it, if I am left here alone, my degenerative state will inevitably return. My hunger will return, and I will seek out the next most potent energy source on this planet. Which, I can assure you, will have catastrophic consequences for your population centers. My sensory capabilities, even in this state, are extensive. She held up a second finger. Third, I represent a scientific and strategic asset of incalculable value to your village. My knowledge of genetics, quantum physics, and bioengineering far surpasses the primitive understanding of this world. I can create wonders you cannot even conceive of. To destroy such a resource would be, to put it mildly, foolish. Her logic was flawless, terrifying, and utterly irrefutable. She dismantled Kakashi's authority not with power, but with cold, hard reason. She's right, Naruto said, his voice lending a final, absolute weight to her argument. He looked at his sensei, his blue eyes calm and patient. The eyes of a teacher explaining a difficult concept to a struggling student. She is not a monster to be slain, Kakashi-sensei. She is a variable that must be controlled. I am the control method. Her stability is directly proportional to her proximity to me. Therefore, the safest place for her, and for this world, is by my side. He paused, letting the implication sink in. Think of me as her Jinchuriki. The analogy was perfect. It was a concept every shinobi in the room understood. A living prison. A symbiotic relationship between a human and an uncontrollable power. It reframed the entire, impossible situation into a context they could, however reluctantly, accept. From the deepest shadows of the laboratory, a figure detached itself from the darkness. The Anbu agent, Weasel, stepped into the crimson half-light, his porcelain mask an emotionless, blank slate. He had seen everything. He had felt the crushing pressure of 21's power, had witnessed the impossible, one-sided battle. And had heard the logical, terrifying aftermath. His orders were to observe and report. But a report could not convey the reality of this. He walked past Kakashi, past Sakura and the glowering Sasuke, and stopped before Naruto and Android 21. For a long, silent moment, he simply stood there, his masked face tilted as he assessed them. He was looking at a paradox, Konoha's most hated pariah, and the key to controlling a being that could shatter nations with a whim. Your logic is sound, Weasel said, his voice a distorted, metallic rasp, filtered through his mask. The asset will be brought to Konoha. She will be under my personal surveillance until we reach the village gates. You, he looked at Naruto, will be held fully accountable for her actions. This is now a joint command situation. Under my provisional authority, Kakashi, see to your team's injuries. We leave in 10 minutes. The Anbu's word was law in the field. Kakashi, though his every instinct screamed in protest, gave a stiff, reluctant nod. The decision had been made. The journey back was a study in tense, fractured silence. They moved through the stark, snow-dusted landscape of the Land of Iron, a GR.I.M. procession under a sky the color of lead. Weasel took the lead, a phantom flitting through the skeletal trees. Kakashi, his pride wounded and his worldview shattered, took the rear guard, his senses on a knife's edge. Sasuke, his arm set in a crude medical splint by Sakura, trudged along in a bubble of sullen, hateful silence, refusing all offers of help. Sakura stayed close to him, her loyalty a powerful, ingrained habit. But her gaze was a moth drawn to a strange, new flame, constantly flickering towards Naruto. And in the center of their formation, an island of impossible calm, walked Naruto and Android 21. She moved with an easy, silent grace, her lab coat fluttering in the biting wind. Her tail swished curiously behind her, a sinuous question mark in the cold air. She did not seem to feel the cold. Her attention was completely, utterly, and scientifically devoted to Naruto. The energy you refer to as chakra is a fascinating biological phenomenon, she mused in a low voice, meant only for him. It seems to be a combination of spiritual and physical energy, circulated through a dedicated network. Primitive, but remarkably versatile. Have you ever attempted to map its quantum signature? It resonates on a different frequency than what I am used to, Naruto replied, his voice equally quiet. It is a closed-loop system, reliant on the user's own biological reserves. My energy is an open system. It draws from elsewhere. A point of infinite, or near infinite, energy potential, she breathed, her eyes lighting up with the pure, unadulterated joy of discovery. Sing. Eularity contained within a biological vessel. The implications are staggering. I must run simulations. I need to build a new laboratory. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time, Naruto felt a genuine spark of connection. She did not see him as a weapon, a demon, or a child. She saw him as a beautiful, unsolvable equation, and she wanted nothing more than to spend an eternity exploring its depths. It was the purest form of acceptance he had ever known. That night, they made a cold camp in a sheltered, rocky overhang. The fire Kakashi built seemed to spurn the oppressive cold, its light flickering against the grim, silent faces of the shinobi. 21, true to her word, did not require sustenance or rest. As Naruto sat by the fire, his eyes closed in a meditative state, she sat across from him, simply observing. Her gaze was not the hungry stare of a predator, but the focused, intense scrutiny of a researcher memorizing every detail of a groundbreaking discovery. At one point, she stood, walked over to a barren, frozen bush, and touched one of its branches. The air around her hand shimmered with a faint, pink light. A single, perfect, impossibly vibrant strawberry materialized on the branch. Glistening with morning dew despite the freezing night, she plucked it, walked over to where Sakura was anxiously watching her, and offered it. Your glycogen levels are low, 21 stated simply. This will help. Sakura stared at the perfect fruit, then at the strange, beautiful woman offering it. Fear warred with a budding, scientific curiosity that was the core of her own personality. Slowly, hesitantly, she took the strawberry. It was cool to the touch, and it smelled of summer. She took a small bite. The flavor was explosive, a perfect, sweet essence that was more real than any strawberry she had ever tasted. How? Sakura whispered. A simple molecular rearrangement, 21 explained, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips. Organic chemistry. It's my specialty. From the other side of the fire, Sasuke watched the exchange, his jaw tightening. He saw Sakura's fear turning to wonder. He saw the easy, impossible power wielded by the android. And he saw Naruto, the center of it all, sitting in serene silence, as if this was all perfectly normal. The gap between them, the gap he had been so sure he was closing, had not just widened. It had become a chasm, an entire universe wide. Later, when the camp was quiet, Sasuke cornered Naruto at the edge of the clearing, a dark silhouette against the star-dusted snow. What are you? He hissed, the words a toxic whisper of rage and confusion. No dead last from the academy can do what you do. No genin can command a monster like that. Naruto turned to him, his blue eyes seeming to absorb the faint starlight. Does it matter, Sasuke? We are teammates. Our objective is to complete the mission and protect the village. All other data is irrelevant. It is not irrelevant to me. Sasuke snarled. I need to know what I'm up against. I need to know how you got so strong. This is not strength you can acquire through training, Naruto said, his voice devoid of pity, but filled with a quiet, ancient truth. It is not a prize to be won. It is a circumstance, a state of being. You should focus on your own path, Sasuke Uchiha. Your hatred for your brother is a powerful fuel, but it is inefficient. It burns hot and fast, and it will eventually consume the engine. He then turned and walked back to the fire, leaving Sasuke alone in the cold, his words a chillingly accurate diagnosis of the Uchiha's soul. Sasuke was left trembling, not from the cold, but from a terrifying, unfamiliar emotion. It was not hatred. It was the dawning, horrifying realization that his entire quest for power might be completely, utterly meaningless in the face of what Naruto was. Days later, they stood on a hill overlooking the familiar, sprawling expanse of Konohagakure. The village was a comforting sight, the Hokage monument a silent, steadfast guardian. But the comfort was a lie. The storm they were bringing back with them would shake this village to its very foundations. As they approached the main gate, the two chunin guards, Kotetsu and Izumo, straightened up, their usual bored expressions shifting to ones of surprise. They saw the legendary Kakashi Hatake, his team of famous genin, and an elite Anbu. It was an impressive entourage. Then they saw the woman. The beautiful woman with the intelligent eyes, the pristine lab coat, and the curious, pink, segmented tail. Kotetsu's jaw dropped. Izumo blinked, rubbed his eyes, and looked again. Weasel stepped forward. Open the gate. We have an urgent report for the Hokage and the Anbu commander. And, a guest. Android 21's gaze swept over the village, her eyes taking in the architecture, the layout, the energy signatures of the thousands of souls within its walls. A small, satisfied smile touched her lips. There was so much here to study. So much to learn. Then, she reached out and, with a casual, proprietary air, took Naruto's hand. Her touch was warm, her grip firm and confident. It was not the gesture of a prisoner, but of a partner. An equal. Naruto looked at his home. The place that had shunned him, hated him, and feared him his entire life. He felt the weight of 21's hand in his own, a tangible link to a power that could unmake this world. He felt the burning glare of Sasuke at his back, the fearful, curious gaze of Sakura, the wary, stressed presence of Kakashi, and the cold, professional observation of Weasel. The equation of his life had just become infinitely more complex. And infinitely more interesting. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Geometry of Power. The Hokage's council chamber was a room designed to intimidate. Carved from the living hardwood of a colossal, ancient tree, its walls were a seamless panorama of Konoha's history, depicting the triumphs and sacrifices of generations. The air was heavy with the scent of aged wood, old paper, and the oppressive weight of political power. At the head of the polished obsidian table sat Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, his lined face a study in weary wisdom. To his right were his former teammates, Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Udatane, the village elders, their expressions as petrified and unyielding as the wood that surrounded them. To his left, half hidden in the shadows, was Danzo Shimura. His bandaged face a mask of cold, calculating ambition, his single visible eye raptor's gleam in the dim light. And standing before them all, a pillar of hardened, cynical authority, was Tsunade, the Anbu commander. This was the seat of Konoha's power. A crucible where nations were broken and futures were forged. And into this crucible walked a 12-year-old boy and a dimension-hopping android. Team 7 stood assembled, but all eyes were on the two figures at their center. Naruto, his face a mask of serene indifference, and Android 21, who observed the council with the detached, analytical curiosity of a biologist examining a new species of insect. Her tail gave a slow, thoughtful swish. Weasel's report, delivered in his distorted, emotionless monotone, had already been given. The silence that followed was a physical pressure, a prelude to a storm. It was Danzo who spoke first, his voice a dry, venomous rasp. An entity of unknown origin and immeasurable power. Eat to the stability of this village and the entire world. The answer is simple. It must be eliminated. The Jinchuriki as well, if he is as intrinsically linked to it as the report suggests. The risk of contamination is too great. The words were a cold, surgical strike, aimed at the heart of the matter. Kaharu Udatane nodded her assent, her lips a thin, disapproving line. We cannot allow such a variable to exist. The 5 great nations are balanced on a knife's edge. A power like this, it invites war. Naruto did not flinch. He did not react. He simply listened, processing their arguments, analyzing their fears. They were thinking in 2 dimensions, in the flat, predictable geometry of shinobi warfare. They saw a nail, and their only tool was a hammer. Elimination is not an option, Tsunade stated, her voice cutting through the elders, pronouncements like a shard of glass. She crossed her arms, her formidable presence dominating the room. Weasel's report, corroborated by Kakashi's testimony, makes it clear that we lack the capacity to eliminate this being. Any attempt would be tantamount to suicide and would likely result in the destruction of this village. She shot a glare at Danzo. Unless your root has developed a jutsu that can unmake reality, I suggest you table your bloodthirsty fantasies. The air crackled with the animosity between the two powerful leaders. Hiruzen held up a hand, a gesture for peace that seemed utterly futile. Tsunade is correct. A direct confrontation is out of the question. But we cannot simply allow her to remain. What is to stop her from turning on us? What is her motivation? Her goal? All eyes turned to 21. She smiled, a bright, academic expression that was utterly unnerving. My motivations are quite simple. First, survival. As has been established, my cellular structure requires periodic stabilization via proximity to Naruto-kun's unique energy field. My continued existence is therefore dependent on his. Second, and far more importantly, curiosity. She gestured to the room around them. This world is a treasure trove of fascinating, if primitive, biological and energetic systems. Your chakra, your keke genkai. The very biology of your tailed beasts, it is a completely new, undocumented field of science. My goal is to study it, to understand it, to catalog it, to put it simply, Hokage-sama, I am a scientist. And you are standing in the middle of the greatest laboratory I have ever encountered. Her words, delivered with such passionate, intellectual zeal, were so alien to their way of thinking that the council was momentarily stunned into silence. They were used to dealing with motivations of power, greed, revenge, and loyalty. The concept of a being whose primary drive was the pure, unadulterated acquisition of knowledge was a variable they had not accounted for. So you wish to treat our people, our secrets, as lab rats, Homura stated, his voice laced with suspicion. Of course not, 21 replied with a dismissive wave of her hand. Vivisection is so inefficient. Observation, non-invasive analysis, and theoretical modeling are far more elegant. Though, she added, a thoughtful look on her face as her eyes drifted to Danzo. I confess, the cellular structure of a specimen who has integrated the genetic material of another lineage, like the Uchiha, while also practicing extensive body otification. That would be a fascinating case study. Danzo's visible eye narrowed. She had analyzed him with a single glance, her words a veiled threat that was as sharp as any blade. This is getting us nowhere, Tsunade grumbled. She needs him. She jabbed a thumb at Naruto. We need her alive, because killing her is not an option and letting her go is a worse one. The boy is the leash. The question is, who holds it? I do, Naruto said. The two words, spoken with a quiet, absolute finality, silenced the room. For the first time, all attention was focused solely on him. He was no longer just the Jinchuriki, the anchor. The leash. He was claiming his own place in the equation. He stepped forward, his blue eyes sweeping over the council, meeting each of their gazes without a hint of fear or deference. You are all asking the wrong questions. You ask, how do we control her? How do we contain her? You are thinking of a cage. But you cannot cage a hurricane. You can only study its patterns, understand its mechanics, and position yourself outside its path of destruction. He turned his gaze to the Hokage. Android 21 is, as she stated, a scientist. Her value to this village is not as a weapon to be pointed, but as a mind to be utilized. Her hunger is not for power, but for knowledge. So, we give it to her. We provide her with the resources she needs to satisfy her curiosity, and in exchange, she provides us with the fruits of her research. You propose we simply trust her. Kaharu scoffed. Trust is an emotional variable. I am proposing a symbiotic, mutually beneficial system based on logic. Naruto countered. She requires two things: proximity to me for stability, and a laboratory for her research. We provide both. In exchange, Konoha gains a technological and scientific advantage that will be unparalleled in the history of this world. Imagine medical technology that can regenerate entire limbs in minutes. Imagine new materials for armor and weaponry that are indestructible. Imagine a complete, fundamental understanding of chakra that could revolutionize the very concept of jutsu. That is what she is offering. He had reframed the entire debate. She was no longer a threat. She was an asset, a prize. Danzo saw it instantly. The potential for weapons, for power, was intoxicating. The elders saw the potential for Konoha to solidify its position as the strongest of the hidden villages for generations to come. Hiruzen saw a path to progress that did not rely on bloodshed. I propose the creation of a new division, Naruto continued, pressing his advantage. The Konohagakure Research and Development Division, Special Projects. Headed by Dr. 21. Her laboratory would be a secure, underground facility. Her access to village resources and personnel would be strictly regulated. And the regulator would be me. It was a masterful stroke of political maneuvering. He had offered each of them exactly what they wanted. Danzo got his weapons development. The elders got containment and a strategic advantage. Hiruzen got a peaceful, progressive solution. And Tsunade, as Anbu commander, would naturally be the one to oversee such a high-level, security-sensitive division. He had given them the illusion of control, while cementing his own position as the linchpin of the entire operation. He was not the leash. He was the master of the entire system. Tsunade stared at him. Her whiskey-colored eyes narrowed in a mixture of fury and grudging, profound respect. The brat had played them. He had taken their fear and their greed and had built a fortress of logic around himself from which he could not be moved. He had not raised his voice. He had not threatened them. He had simply won. The proposal has merit, Hiruzen said slowly, a small, tired smile on his face. He looked at the boy he had watched grow up as a lonely outcast, and saw for the first time the shadow of a leader far greater than any Hokage before him. The council, trapped by the elegance of their own self-interest, had no choice but to agree. The decision was made. The news rippled through the village's upper echelons like a seismic shock. Within hours, Naruto Uzumaki had gone. From being the village pariah to the most politically significant genin in Konoha's history. And at his side was the mysterious, brilliant, and terrifyingly beautiful woman known only as Dr. 21. Their first stop after the council meeting was the Yamanaka clan's intelligence division. Ino was there, sorting through mission reports, when he walked in. The entire room fell silent. She looked up and saw him, with the android woman at his side, and her breath caught in her throat. He wasn't looking for her father, the head of the division. He was looking for her. Ino Yamanaka, Naruto said, his voice calm and direct. Your mental acuity is exceptional. Dr. 21 requires an assistant to help her interface with this village's data systems. Someone who can process and catalog information rapidly. Your clan's techniques would be efficient. The position would grant you high-level security clearance and access to a field of knowledge that no one else on this planet possesses. It was not a request. It was an offer, a challenge, an invitation to step through the door she had tried to force open. He was giving her the key. He was acknowledging her mind, her talent, in a way no one, not even her own father, ever had. He wasn't just offering her a job. He was offering her answers. Ino stared at him, her heart hammering. The boy she had once scorned, the cosmic entity that had shattered her mind, was now offering her a place at the center of the new world he was creating. I accept, she said, her voice clear and firm, her aqua eyes burning with a new, fierce intelligence. Her obsession had just been given a purpose. Next, he went to the probationary housing for Zabuza and Haku. He found Haku in the small, Spartan garden, tending to a patch of frost-covered moss. When she saw him, our entire being seemed to light up from within. Naruto-sama, she breathed, bowing deeply. Haku, he said, his voice softer than it had been with the council or Ino. Your Kekkei Genkai is unique. It is a mastery of energy at a molecular level. Dr. 21 believes it could be the key to developing new forms of cryostasis and medical preservation. She wishes to study your abilities. Non-invasively, he held out a hand. But that is not why I am here. Your life is your own. I am not your master. But I am offering you a place. A purpose. We are building something new in this village. Something that will change everything. I want you to be a part of it. If you choose. Haku looked at his outstretched hand. He was her savior, the golden light that had pulled her from the darkness. She had pledged her life to him on that bridge. Now, he was offering her not servitude, but partnership. He was offering her a home. Tears welled in her eyes, as pure and perfect as her ice. She placed her hand in his without hesitation. Anywhere you go, Naruto-sama, I will follow. Her devotion was no longer the blind loyalty of a tool. It was the unwavering fealty of a soul that had found its true north. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place in a newly commissioned, cavernous, and utterly empty underground facility, designated Sector 7. It was a concrete shell, a blank canvas. Tsunade stood in the center of the vast space. Her arms crossed, her face a thundercloud of controlled fury. Naruto and 21 stood opposite her. This is your kingdom, Tsunade said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You have your laboratory, you have your leash, you have your assistants, you have everything you wanted. Now, what is to stop you, she glared at 21, from deciding one day that you've grown tired of your research, and want to dissect us all for fun? 21 smiled sweetly. Nothing at all, except for him. She looped her arm through Naruto's, a gesture of casual, absolute possession. My anchor, my cure, my favorite subject. As long as he is here, and as long as he continues to be the most fascinating puzzle in the known universe, my intellectual curiosity will far outweigh my baser appetites. You have my word as a scientist. Tsunade's gaze shifted to Naruto. And you, brat, you played the council like a fiddle. You have more political power now than any genin in history. What do you get out of this? What is your angle? Naruto looked around the empty, cavernous space. He saw not a concrete tomb, but a crucible of creation. He saw a future where the endless, tragic cycle of war and hatred that defined this world could be broken. Not by force, but by a fundamental shift in understanding. This world operates on a flawed equation, Commander, he said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Power equals strength. Strength equals control. It is a formula that always resolves into conflict. I am proposing a new equation. Knowledge equals power. Understanding equals strength. And innovation. Innovation equals freedom. Freedom from the cycles of the past. He met her gaze, his ancient blue eyes holding a wisdom that was as vast and as patient as the stars. You asked what my angle is. It is simple. I wish to balance the equation. Tsunade stared at him, at the quiet, unassuming boy who spoke of changing the very fabric of their reality. She had spent her life fighting, losing, and becoming hard and cynical in the face of a brutal, unchanging world. This boy, this impossible, alien child, was not trying to fight the world. He was trying to rewrite its fundamental laws. She saw in him the brilliant, hopeful spark she had once seen in her brother, Nawaki, and in her love, Dan. But where they had been dreamers, he was an architect. A strange, unfamiliar feeling stirred in the frozen depths of her heart. It was not anger. It was not suspicion. It was a terrifying, exhilarating flicker of hope. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Alchemy of a Blank Canvas. Sector 7 was no longer an empty concrete shell. In the 2 weeks since its christening, it had become a living testament to a science that bordered on divine magic. The vast, cavernous space was now a labyrinth of humming, glowing machinery that seemed to have grown organically from the floor and walls. There were no messy wires, no clanking pistons, no belching smoke. There was only the silent, elegant thrum of advanced technology. Crystalline conduits pulsed with a soft, internal light, channeling unimaginable amounts of energy. Floating holographic interfaces shimmered in the air, displaying streams of complex data and intricate molecular models that would have given Konoha's entire corps of cryptographers a collective aneurysm. The air, once stale and dusty, was now crisp, cool, and carried the faint, sterile scent of ozone and creation. This was not a laboratory. It was a womb, and a new world was being gestated within it. At the center of this technological symphony was its conductor, Android 21. She moved with a focused, almost frantic grace, a whirlwind of intellectual energy. Her lab coat was a white blur as she darted between a quantum entanglement loom that was weaving a new form of hyper-den. Say armor fiber and a bio-forge that was currently cloning perfectly healthy, chakra-receptive nerve tissue. Her mind, a supercomputer of unparalleled power, was juggling a dozen different revolutionary projects at once. Her brown eyes alight with the fire of pure, unadulterated discovery. The bonding process is fascinating, she was saying, her words a rapid-fire cascade of scientific ecstasy. Quote, the Yamanaka clan's mind-body switch isn't a simple projection of consciousness, it's a temporary quantum superposition of two distinct neural energy patterns onto a single physical vessel. The spiritual energy component acts as a carrier wave to prevent decoherence. Ino-chan, are you getting this? Across the main console, Ino Yamanaka looked up, her aqua eyes wide and slightly bloodshot. As surrounded by a halo of holographic screens, her fingers flying across a touch interface as she tried to translate 21's cosmic-level concepts into a data retrieval system that Konoha's primitive servers could even begin to comprehend. In 2 weeks, she had learned more about the fundamental nature of the universe than her clan had in 10 generations. It was exhilarating. It was exhausting. As the most important thing she had ever done. I'm trying, 21-sensei, she said, her voice a mixture of awe and exasperation. But you're explaining quantum mechanics to a society that just recently perfected the explosive tag. The translation is challenging. A cup of fragrant, steaming jasmine tea materialized at her elbow. She looked up to see Haku, a serene smile on her face. In this world of humming super science, Haku had become an oasis of quiet, human grace. She was not a scientist. She did not understand the complex theories that filled the air. But she understood balance. She understood the needs of the people around her. She was the one who remembered that they needed to eat, to rest, to hydrate. She was the silent, watchful guardian of their humanity in this cathedral of the post-human. You should rest, Ino-san, Haku said, her voice a soft, gentle melody against the hum of the machines. Your chakra levels are becoming erratic. Rest is an inefficient allocation of resources. 21 called out without looking up from her work. A nutrient-rich protein slurry and a 5-minute cycle in the somatic regeneration pod would increase her productivity by at least 37%. She will have the tea. Doctor, a calm, quiet voice interjected. Naruto sat cross-legged on a raised observation platform, seemingly meditating. He had not moved for hours, yet his presence was the anchor of the entire facility. He was the silent, observing star around which these brilliant, chaotic planets orbited. 21's frantic energy, Ino's stressed brilliance, Haku's quiet devotion, it all revolved around him. 21 paused, her hands hovering over a glowing energy matrix. A flicker of something, a shadow of the old hunger, crossed her face. It was a subtle thing, a slight tightening around her eyes. A momentary paling of her skin. The stabilization was holding, but the degenerative flaw in her cells was a chronic condition, a background noise that could never be truly silenced, only managed. It was time for her calibration. She turned and looked up at Naruto. The frantic energy drained away, replaced by a look of profound, desperate need. Without a word, he descended from the platform. Haku and Ino respectfully, and perhaps a little fearfully, gave them a wide berth. This was a ritual they had come to understand but could never be a part of. Naruto held out his hand. 21 took it, her own hand trembling slightly. It was not a lover's touch. It was the desperate grip of a drowning woman reaching for a life raft. Naruto placed his other hand gently on her forehead. He closed his eyes. A soft, golden light, the color of a dawn that had never been seen on this world, enveloped them. It was not a brilliant, blinding flash, but a gentle, pervasive glow. There was no sound, but Ino could feel a vibration in her mind, a soothing, harmonic resonance that calmed the frantic buzzing of her thoughts. Haku felt a warmth spread through the room, a life-giving heat that had nothing to do with temperature. A warmth that seemed to make the very air around them feel alive. For 21, the sensation was salvation. It was the golden, life-affirming energy of the phoenix flowing into her, not as a raw power source, but as a correcting code. It was a master architect repairing a flawed foundation. The frantic, self-devouring static in her cells fell silent. The gnawing, phantom hunger receded, replaced by a profound, blissful sense of equilibrium, of peace, of wholeness. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. She leaned her forehead against his chest, a gesture of absolute, unconditional surrender. Thank you, Naruto-kun, she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion that was far deeper than gratitude. The system is balanced, Naruto stated simply, withdrawing his hands. The golden light faded, but the sense of peace remained, a lingering perfume in the air. The moment was interrupted by a sharp, metallic wrap on the newly installed blast door that served as the entrance to Sector 7. The door hissed open to reveal Tsunade. She stood there, her arms crossed, her expression a carefully constructed mask of cynical disapproval. She had made it a point to conduct daily, unannounced inspections. Ostensibly to monitor the S-class threat, but the truth was more complex. She was drawn to this place, to the impossible hope it represented, and to the impossible boy at its center. Her gaze swept the room, taking in the scene. The exhausted but brilliant Yamanaka prodigy. The serene, devoted former Mist Nin. The terrifyingly powerful android leaning against He-R charged with an intimacy that made Tsunade's jaw clench. And the boy, the Jinchuriki, the enigma, who stood at the heart of it all with a calm that was more commanding than any army. "Am I interrupting something?" Tsunade asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "A routine maintenance procedure, Commander," 21 replied smoothly, stepping away from Naruto, her composure instantly restored. "Is there a purpose to this visit? Or is this simply another one of your audits?" "The chunin exams begin in 1 hour," Tsunade said, her eyes fixed on Naruto. "The first stage is a written test at the academy. Kakashi is waiting for you at the entrance. Don't be late." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "And 21, she said, not looking back. "Danzo has already submitted a formal request for AP. Rototype of that hyper-dense armor fiber. I denied it, for now. Don't give me a reason to change my mind." The door hissed shut, leaving a warning hanging in the air. An hour later, Naruto stood with a disgruntled Sasuke and an anxious Sakura in front of the academy. The contrast was jarring. He had just come from a world of quiet, focused creation, of beings operating at the peak of their potential. Now he was back in the world of adolescent posturing, of nervous energy and pointless rivalries. It felt like stepping back in time. Ino and Haku were not with him. Ino, as 21's official assistant, was exempt from the exams. Her new position granting her a de facto rank far above any genin. Haku, a political refugee from a rival nation, was not eligible. But as he had left, 21 had handed him a small, featureless silver device that looked like a pen. A simple multi-spectrum sensory probe, she had explained. It will passively analyze the ambient energy signatures, biological data, and psychological stress levels of everyone in the room. The data will be fascinating. It was her way of being there with him. The first exam was exactly as Naruto had predicted, a test not of knowledge, but of intelligence gathering. A test of the shinobi art of cheating without being caught. As Ibiki Morino, the terrifying, scar-faced proctor, explained the ridiculously difficult questions and the draconian rules, Naruto simply closed his eyes. He didn't need to copy. He didn't need a Sharingan or a mind jutsu. The universe was a river of information, and he was simply listening to its flow. He could feel the subtle shift in the air as Sasuke activated his Sharingan to copy the movements of another student's pencil. He could sense the fine, almost invisible thread of chakra that Ino's teammate, Shoji, was using to get answers from Shikamaru. He could hear the faint, high-frequency whisper of Shino's Kikaichu insects relaying information. And he could feel the intent of the proctor, the core purpose of the test itself, to weed out those who lacked the courage and ingenuity to seek out information, and those who lacked the resolve to stake their future on a single, final question. He picked up his pencil. He did not answer the first 9 questions. He simply waited. He could feel the rising tide of panic and desperation in the room, a chaotic symphony of fear. When the time came for the 10th and final question, the true test, he wrote a single sentence on his paper. The most vital piece of intelligence is the objective of the mission. He had not just passed the test. He had defined it. As the successful teams filed out of the academy, their relief palpable, Naruto felt a new sensation. A gaze. It was not the hateful glare of a villager, or the wary scrutiny of a shinobi. This was different. It was cold, ancient, and possessive. It was the gaze of a scientist, but a perverse one. A biologist who did not wish to study the specimen, but to dissect it, to consume it, to become it. A snake eyeing a rare, magnificent bird. He subtly angled the sensory probe 21 had given him in the direction of the gaze. The device remained silent, but he could feel a faint, almost imperceptible vibration from it. It was collecting data on a signature that was unique. A powerful, corrupt, and fundamentally unstable energy. From the rooftop of a nearby building, a figure cloaked in the guise of a grass nin watched the crowd below. Orochimaru's golden, slitted eyes were not focused on the brooding Uchiha boy, his intended prize. They were locked onto the blonde Jinchuriki. Orochimaru, a master of sensing chakra, could feel the monstrous, caged power of the Kyuubi. But that wasn't what fascinated him. Beneath that raging, red inferno was something else. A power signature so vast, so calm, so utterly alien that it made the Kyuubi feel like a candle flame next to a sun. It was an energy that was perfectly stable, infinitely deep. It was the energy of immortality, of godhood. And there was another, a new player on the board he hadn't accounted for. He couldn't see her, but he could feel her lingering presence around the blonde boy, a complex, hungry, and brilliantly intelligent aura that was almost as alien as the boy's own. It was a chaotic, artificial energy, but it held the potential for infinite evolution. Kukuku, a silent, sibilant laugh echoed in his mind. Sasuke-kun is a fine vessel. A perfect canvas. But this is a new science. A new form of existence. His original plan for the chunin exams, his grand orchestration of Konoha's destruction, suddenly seemed so provincial. So lacking in ambition. He had come here seeking a new body, a powerful set of eyes. But he had just discovered two living, breathing keys to the secrets of the universe. The hunt had a new prey. Down below, Naruto pocketed the sensory probe, his serene expression unchanged. But his ancient, cosmic consciousness had registered the threat. He had identified the discordant note in the symphony of the world. It was a flawed, selfish, and inefficient predator. And it had just turned its gaze upon him. The exams were no longer just a test. They were a hunting ground. And he was no longer just an observer. He was the target. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Ecology of a Predator. The air in Training Ground 44, the infamous forest of death, was not empty. It was a thick, humid soup of competing life signals. A chaotic, vibrant ecosystem that assaulted the senses. The scent was a primal perfume of damp, rotting earth, the sweet, cloying fragrance of strange, carnivorous blossoms. And the musky tang of unseen predators. The sound was a constant, low-grade hum of insect life, punctuated by the rustle of unseen things in the undergrowth and the distant, territorial shriek of creatures that had never known a cage. For the genin gathered before its sealed gates, it was a terrifying void on the map, a place of legend and death. For Naruto, it was the most beautifully complex symphony he had yet encountered in this world. He stood with his team, a silent, unmoving pillar of calm amidst a sea of nervous chatter and anxious bravado. His senses, not limited to the 5 that defined his peers, were extended. Tasting the very life force of the forest. He could feel the vast, interconnected network of fungal mycelium beneath the earth, a subterranean brain processing the slow, patient thoughts of the ancient trees. He could feel the frantic, high-frequency heartbeats of 1,000 smaller creatures, the slow, ponderous life of the giant sloths in the canopy, the cold, patient hunger of the colossal snakes that slept in the sun-dappled clearings. It was a single, living organism, and he could feel its every breath, its every heartbeat, its every pang of hunger. All right, maggots, listen up. The voice belonged to Anko Mitarashi, the proctor for the second exam. She was a whirlwind of dangerous energy, clad in a fishnet top and a trench coat, a kunai held loosely in her hand as she surveyed the terrified genin with a wide, manic grin. Her chakra was a chaotic, joyful thing, a firecracker that seemed to be in a constant state of near detonation. This is your next test. A survival exercise. The rules are simple, she said, her grin widening. There are no rules. She held up 2 scrolls, one marked, Heaven, the other, Earth. Your team will be given one. You have 5 days to get to the tower in the center of the forest with both a Heaven and an Earth scroll. You'll have to fight the other teams to get the scroll you need. And, she added, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper as she gestured to the forest behind her, you'll have to fight it. This forest is not your friend. It will try to eat you, poison you, and drive you insane. Most of you won't make it. In fact, I'd be surprised if half of you come back alive. She licked her lips, a gesture of pure, unadulterated glee at the prospect of the impending carnage. The wave of fear that washed over the assembled genin was a palpable thing, a discordant, screeching note in the forest symphony. Naruto remained impassive. He subtly touched the silver pen-like device in his pocket. It was a direct, quantum-entangled communication linked to Sector 7. A private line to his anchor. Less than the Proctor's psychological state is fascinating. Greater than 21's voice echoed in his mind, crisp and clear as a bell. Less than she exhibits symptoms of severe post-traumatic stress, but has channeled the resulting hyper-vigilance and adrenaline addiction into a functional, if highly erratic, professional persona. The latent energy signature of a parasitic bio-weapon is also present in her chakra network, though it appears to be dormant. A curse mark, I believe. Fascinating. I would love to get a tissue sample. Greater than. Less than later, Doctor. The current objective is to acquire a scroll and proceed to the designated coordinates. Greater than Naruto thought back, the communication instantaneous and silent. Less than of course, Naruto-kun. Efficiency dictates a direct approach. Based on a probabilistic analysis of the other team's chakra levels and psychological profiles, the team from the village hidden in the rain is the most likely to possess a different scroll and the least likely to offer significant resistance. They are currently positioned 3.2 kilometers north-northeast of your entry point, exhibiting high levels of anxiety, which will impair their combat effectiveness. Greater than. Their team was given an earth scroll. As the gates creaked open, Sasuke, his face a mask of grim determination, took the lead. Stay sharp. We find a weak team, take their scroll, and get to the tower. No distractions. Sakura nodded, her knuckles white where she gripped her kunai. They plunged into the oppressive gloom of the forest. The light dimmed instantly, the thick canopy of the colossal trees filtering the sun into a dappled, disorienting twilight. The air grew heavier, wetter. They had been moving for less than 10 minutes when a gust of wind, unnaturally sharp and cold, tore through the clearing they were in. It was a jutsu, a powerful one. A massive, shadowy figure rose from the ground, its features indistinct, its presence a wave of pure, unadulterated malice. Sasuke's Sharingan flared to life. Sakura froze, her training warring with the primal terror that the figure exuded. Naruto sighed, a soft, almost inaudible sound. Less than Doctor. Analysis. Greater than. Less than a genjutsu. Greater than 21's voice replied instantly in his mind. Less than a very crude one. It's a wide-band auditory and visual illusion designed to trigger the fear centers of the brain. The caster is a single individual. Concealed in the canopy 15 meters to your left. His chakra signature is pathetic. Barely above civilian levels. A scare tactic. Inefficient, but potentially effective against psychologically fragile opponents. Greater than. Before Sasuke could waste his chakra on a pointless fireball or Sakura could fall completely into the illusion's grip, Naruto raised a single hand. He did not perform a jutsu. He simply released a minute. Controlled pulse of his own energy. It was not chakra. It was a pure, golden wave of order, of balance. The genjutsu shattered, not like broken glass, but like a mist burning off in the morning sun. The terrifying figure dissolved into nothingness. The oppressive feeling vanished. In the trees to their left, there was a surprised yelp and the sound of someone falling ungracefully through the branches. Sasuke and Sakura stared, stunned. They hadn't even seen him move. The illusion is broken, Naruto stated calmly. The opposing team has revealed their position and their reliance on psychological warfare. They are no longer a threat. He began walking again, not even bothering to look at the trembling genin who was now trying to extricate himself from a thorny bush. The message was clear. They were so far beneath his notice that they were not even worth engaging. For Sasuke, it was another searing brand of humiliation. He, an Uchiha with the mighty Sharingan, had been preparing for a life-or-death battle. Naruto had dismissed it with a wave of his hand. The chasm between them was growing, and it was filled with Sasuke's own gnawing, impotent rage. They continued on, the forest growing darker, more menacing. They encountered a giant, multi-headed leech that Sakura, in a surprising display of courage and textbook knowledge, managed to immobilize with a well-placed paper bomb that ignited a pocket of flammable marsh gas. Naruto noted her growing competence with a flicker of detached approval. But he could feel it, growing stronger with every step they took. The other signature. The one he had felt outside the academy. The cold, ancient, possessive gaze. It was a cancer in the forest's life song. A perversion of the natural order. A discordant, screeching noise of corrupted life and insatiable, selfish ambition. Less than Naruto-kun, I am detecting a highly unusual energy signature approaching your position. Greater than 21's voice crackled in his mind, her usual calm tone now laced with a sharp, scientific urgency. Less than it's a bio-signature, but it's fundamentally unstable. It shows signs of extensive, repeated, and highly invasive genetic modification. The cellular decay. It's almost as bad as my own, but it's being held in check by a constant, parasitic infusion of external life force. This being is a walking plague. I advise extreme caution. It is an abomination of science. Greater than. A long, sibilant hiss echoed through the trees, a sound that seemed to make the very air curdle. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with an unnatural, serpentine grace. Long, black hair framed a face that was impossibly pale, with sharp, reptilian features and golden, slitted eyes that burned with a cold, ancient intelligence. It was the grass nin from before, but the disguise was a thin, fragile shell over the monstrous truth beneath. Kukuku. To find you all so soon. It seems my luck is good today, Orochimaru whispered, his voice a dry, rasping sound. He unfurled a tongue that was impossibly, grotesquely long, and licked his lips. His killing intent was a physical force, a focused wave of pure malice that washed over them. It was not the chaotic bloodlust of Anko. This was the cold, patient, suffocating pressure of a predator that knows it has its prey cornered. Sakura collapsed, her mind shutting down under the sheer weight of the terror. Sasuke, to his credit, remained standing. Though he was trembling, sweat beading on his forehead, his Sharingan spinning frantically as it tried, and failed, to process the sheer horror of the being before him. Naruto was unaffected. He simply tilted his head, his blue eyes calm and analytical. He was not looking at a monster. He was looking at a flawed design. Less than an interesting application of focused bioenergy, greater than he communicated to 21. Less than the killing intent, is a low-frequency psychic broadcast, designed to overload the amygdala of a standard biological entity. It resonates at the frequency of primal fear. Inefficient against a system that does not process emotion as a primary input. Greater than. Orochimaru's golden eyes widened, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second. The boy, the Jinchuriki, he was completely immune. He was looking at him not with fear, but with curiosity. As if Orochimaru were the specimen under a microscope. This was new. You were an interesting one, Naruto-kun, Orochimaru hissed. His interest in Sasuke momentarily forgotten. The Kyuubi's power is a raging inferno. But you are a deep, cold ocean. What is the source of such a perfect, stable power? It is the key to true immortality, isn't it? Immortality is a flawed concept, Naruto replied, his voice a calm counterpoint to Orochimaru's sibilant whisper. It implies a static state. The universe is not static. It is a system of constant change, of creation and destruction. To resist that system is to become a cancerous cell, endlessly replicating but serving no purpose. You are not a god, Orochimaru. You are a disease. The insult was so profound, so fundamental, that Orochimaru's mask of playful malice cracked, revealing the seething, ancient vanity beneath. He moved, his body stretching, contorting, his neck elongating as he shot forward like a striking snake, his fangs bared, aiming for Naruto's throat. Naruto did not move. Just as the fangs were about to sink into his flesh, a wall of pure, golden light, the color of a newborn star, materialized in front of him. It was not a chakra barrier. It was a solid, physical manifestation of order. Orochimaru's fangs, which could bite through steel, impacted the barrier with a sickening crunch. He was thrown back, clutching his face, his golden eyes wide with shock and pain. Impossible, he hissed. What is that energy? Less than his technique is a perversion of the body's natural elasticity, facilitated by a near-total replacement of his cellular makeup with a more malleable, reptilian base, greater than 21's voice analyzed in Naruto's mind. Less than he's barely human. A fascinating, if disgusting, chimera. That barrier you just created, the energy reading is off the charts. It didn't just block him. It momentarily, corrected the corrupted cells in his face. It must have been excruciatingly painful. Greater than. Orochimaru, enraged and fascinated, changed tactics. He flew through a series of hand seals. 10,000 snakes, he cried, spewing forth a writhing, hissing tide of serpents that surged towards Naruto. A living tsunami of venom and death. Naruto simply raised his hand again. This time, the golden light did not form a barrier. It washed over the tide of snakes. And where it touched them, they ceased to be. They did not burn. They did not die. They simply unraveled, their biological forms dissolving into a shower of glittering, non-sentient motes of light, earned to the fundamental energy from which they had been created. The entire jutsu, one of Orochimaru's most powerful, was unmade in less than a second. The legendary Sannin, the mad genius, the immortal serpent, stood in stunned, absolute silence. He had fought Kage, battled gods, and manipulated the world from the shadows for decades. He had never, in his long, unnatural life, witnessed a power like this. It was not the power to destroy. It was the power to erase, to edit reality itself. He realized then that he could not win. He could not capture this boy. To fight him was to court complete and utter annihilation. But he was still a scientist. And if he couldn't have the primary specimen, he would take the secondary. With a speed that was still blindingly fast, he flickered past the stunned Naruto. His attention now back on the trembling, terrified Uchiha. If I cannot have the ocean, I will settle for the storm. He hissed. His neck elongated again, and he sank his fangs deep into Sasuke's shoulder. The boy screamed, a raw, agonized sound, as a black, swirling pattern of 3 tomo spread from the wound, a mark of pure, corrupting power. Sasuke's eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed. Naruto watched it happen. He could have stopped it easily, but he did not. Less than Naruto-kun. Greater than 21's voice was sharp in his mind. Less than he's injecting the Uchiha with the parasitic bio-weapon. The energy signature is designed to forcibly unlock and then corrupt the subject's latent potential, while also creating a dependency on the caster's own chakra for stabilization. It's a biological slave brand. Why are you allowing this? Greater than. Less than it is an opportunity for observation, Doctor. Greater than Naruto replied, his mental voice as calm as ever. Less than Sasuke's obsession with power makes him the perfect host. His development was stagnating, limited by his own psychological trauma. This is a new variable, a catalyst. We will study its effects. We will understand its mechanics. And then, we will correct it. All data is useful. Greater than. Orochimaru pulled back, a triumphant, reptilian grin on his face. He held up an earth scroll. I will take this, he said, tucking it away. A small price for such a wonderful gift. Grow strong, Sasuke-kun. And when you are ready, seek me out. With a final, lingering, and now deeply covetous look at Naruto, he melted back into the shadows, his presence vanishing from the forest. The silence he left behind was broken only by Sakura's terrified sobs and Sasuke's pained, unconscious groans. The immediate threat was gone. But a new, insidious one had just been planted. Sakura, her body finally responding to her commands, scrambled over to Sasuke, her hands glowing with green chakra as she desperately tried to stabilize him. She looked up at Naruto, her eyes wild with fear and confusion. Naruto, what was that? What do we do? Naruto walked over and knelt beside Sasuke. He placed a hand over the curse mark, his eyes closing. He was not healing it. He was reading it, analyzing its structure, its purpose, its corrupting code. He has been injected with a parasitic agent, Naruto stated, his voice a calm, clinical diagnosis. It is designed to amplify his power at the cost of his autonomy. For now, it is dormant. We must get him to the tower. He requires medical attention that is beyond your current capabilities. He then looked at Sakura. He saw her terror, her helplessness. But beneath it, he saw a flicker of steel. The same resolve he had seen when she faced the leech. You have a fine mind for memory and precision, Sakura, he said, his voice direct, factual. Your chakra control is the most refined on this team. But you have allowed fear and emotional attachment to become debilitating variables. The Uchiha is incapacitated. I am the primary offensive and defensive asset. That makes you the mission commander. Your objective is to get your assets to the tower, using all available intelligence. What is your decision? He was not comforting her. He was not praising her. He was giving her a problem to solve. He was treating her not as a weak link, but as a functioning part of the system. For Sakura, it was a shock to her core. In the face of this overwhelming horror, he was giving her responsibility. He was trusting her. Something inside her, the sniveling, Sasuke-obsessed child, broke. And in its place, something new, something stronger, began to grow. She took a deep breath, her tear-filled eyes hardening with a resolve she didn't know she possessed. She looked at Sasuke, then at the map. We need a secure, defensible position to rest. The river is too exposed. The caves are likely inhabited. There, she pointed to a spot on the map. A hollow in one of the giant trees. High off the ground, a single point of entry. It's our best option. Naruto gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. A logical course of action. He effortlessly lifted Sasuke's unconscious form. Lead the way, Commander. As Sakura took point, her back straight, her senses sharp, Naruto followed. Carrying their fallen comrade, he glanced at the swirling black mark on Sasuke's neck. Orochimaru thought he had given Sasuke a gift of power, a leash to control him. But all he had done was introduce a fascinating new piece of malware into a system that Naruto, and his brilliant, hungry doctor, now had every intention of hacking. The experiment had just begun. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Crucible of Command. Silence was a foreign country, and they had just crossed its border. After the chaotic, vibrant, and constantly screaming life of the forest, the interior of the central tower was a tomb. The air was still, cool, and tasted of ancient dust and forgotten stone. A single, colossal pillar dominated the central chamber, inscribed with characters that none of them could read. The only sound was the harsh, ragged panting of their own breath and the low, pained groans coming from Sasuke's unconscious form. Sakura, her face smudged with dirt and dried blood, did not relax. The forest had been a physical test. This was something else. A waiting room. A cage. Her mind, honed by Naruto's unexpected challenge and the harsh realities of the last 2 days, was a whirlwind of tactical assessment. We made it, she said, her voice a low, steady command that bore no trace of its former girlish tremor. But we're exposed here. Naruto, help me get him to the side chamber. We need a defensible position before we open the scrolls. Naruto complied without a word, his movements fluid and silent as he carried Sasuke's dead weight. He was no longer leading. He was following her orders. A willing and powerful asset under her command. For Sakura, the sensation was both terrifying and intoxicating. It was the weight of true responsibility. They found a small, featureless antechamber off the main hall. It was little more than a stone box, but it had only one entrance. Sakura immediately began her work, her movements economical and precise. She laid Sasuke down gently, her hands glowing with the green light of the mystical palm technique as she began a detailed diagnostic. The results were not good. He was burning with a fever, his chakra coils were in a state of violent, chaotic flux. And the black, tomo pattern mark on his neck seemed to pulse with a faint, malevolent light, like a sleeping eye. His systems are fighting a foreign agent, she murmured, her mind racing through the medical texts she had memorized. My jutsu can replenish his stamina, but it can't fight the source. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. The thing Orochimaru put in him is actively draining and corrupting his chakra. Naruto knelt beside her, placing 2 fingers on Sasuke's forehead. He closed his eyes. He was not sensing chakra in the traditional way. He was extending his consciousness, reading the information flowing through Sasuke's system. At the same time, he activated his silent, mental link to Sector 7. Less than Doctor. The data from the probe should be transmitting. I am getting a direct reading now. Analysis. Greater than. In the humming, pristine laboratory miles away, 21's eyes snapped open, a dozen holographic screens of complex biological data blooming around her. Less than fascinating. Utterly barbaric, but fascinating. Greater than. Her voice echoed in Naruto's mind, a symphony of scientific revulsion and glee. Less than. It's not just a seal, Naruto-kun. It's a sentient viral firmware. A bio-weapon designed to overwrite the host's genetic and energetic makeup. The energy it's feeding on isn't just Sasuke's chakra, it's his very life force, converting it into a corrupted, aggressive form of what this Orochimaru calls senjutsu. It's a brute force catalyst, designed to unlock his Uchiha bloodline traits at an accelerated, and highly unstable, rate. Greater than. Less than. Can it be neutralized? Greater than, Naruto asked. Less than, not remotely. And not without a sample of the original caster's genetic material. It's a symbiotic parasite, keyed directly to its master. Any attempt to remove it with external force, like a standard sealing jutsu, would likely kill the host. It's an elegant, if monstrous, piece of biological engineering. I must admit, I'm almost impressed. Greater than. Naruto opened his eyes. The information processed and filed. We cannot remove it, he told Sakura, his voice calm and factual. We can only manage the symptoms. Keep him stable. Conserve your chakra. Our objective is to survive until the exam is over and we can get him to a more advanced medical facility. By which he meant, of course, 21's lab. Sakura nodded, her expression grim. The responsibility fell squarely on her shoulders. For the next several hours, a tense, grueling routine began. Sakura would monitor Sasuke, applying just enough medical jutsu to keep the fever from consuming him, her own chakra reserves dwindling with each application. Naruto stood watch at the entrance to the chamber, a silent, motionless sentinel. He was not just watching the main hall. He was listening to the tower itself, to the subtle shifts in the air currents, to the faint, distant sounds of other teams arriving, of battles being fought and won in the floors above. It was in this crucible of fear and exhaustion that Sakura Haruno was reforged. The foolish, lovelorn girl who had entered the forest died somewhere in the dark, replaced by a grimly determined medic and commander. She watched Naruto, the unmoving, unreadable boy who had placed this impossible burden on her, and for the first time, she did not feel confusion or awe. She felt a flicker of understanding. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a god. He was a standard, an absolute, and he was silently, relentlessly, pushing her to rise to it. The attack came with the subtlety of a thrown brick. There was no warning, no sound of approach. One moment, the chamber was silent. The next, a sonic boom ripped through the air, throwing Sakura off her feet and sending a wave of concussive force into the room. Naruto, who had been standing, was suddenly in front of Sasuke's body. A shield of golden light absorbing the brunt of the attack. At the entrance to the antechamber stood three figures, all wearing the headband of the village hidden in the sound. One was a mummy-like figure with a strange, armored gauntlet, his face mostly hidden by bandages. Dosu Kinyuda. Another was a brash-looking young man with air holes in his palms. Zaku Abumi. The third was a long-haired kunoichi with a condescending smirk. Kin Suchi. Well, look what we have here, Dosu said, his voice a calm, analytical rasp that was strangely muffled by his bandages. The Uchiha, Lord Orochimaru, will be pleased we found him so quickly. Zaku cracked his knuckles, a brutish grin on his face. Forget the Uchiha. Did you see that? The blonde brat just blocked Dosu's attack without moving. He's the one we should be after. Don't be an idiot, Zaku, Kin sneered. Our orders are to test the Uchiha. The others are just trash to be taken out. Naruto slowly stood, the golden light fading. He looked at the three of them, his expression unreadable. Less than 3 new signatures, greater than 21's voice noted in his mind. Less than their bodies have also been heavily modified. The mummy figure uses focused sonic vibrations. The one with the holes in his hands uses air pressure. The girl uses Senbon and auditory genjutsu. All crude, but potentially effective applications of waveform manipulation. They were sent by the serpent. Their objective is not your scroll. It is Sasuke. Greater than. You will not touch him, Sakura said. The voice was not a shriek. It was a low, guttural growl. She had gotten to her feet, placing herself between the sound Nin and Sasuke. Her green eyes, no longer wide with fear, were narrowed slits of pure, feral defiance. She held a kunai in her hand, and it was not trembling. Dosu let out a dry chuckle. Brave words, little girl, but you are out of your league. Naruto, Sakura said, not taking her eyes off the enemy. Protect Sasuke. This is my fight. Naruto tilted his head. He could have ended the confrontation in less than a nanosecond. He could have unmade them, as he had the thugs on the bridge. But he saw the look in her eyes. The fire he had intentionally kindled was now a blazing inferno. To interfere now would be to extinguish it. Less than an inefficient emotional decision, greater than 21 commented in his mind. Less than her probability of success is less than 3%. Greater than. Less than data is not always about success, doctor. Greater than Naruto replied. Less than sometimes, it is about the attempt. Observe. Greater than. He stepped back, positioning himself beside Sasuke, becoming once again the silent observer. The Sound Nin looked at him, confused by his sudden passivity, but Sakura's challenge was too direct to ignore. What followed was not a battle. It was a testament to sheer, unadulterated will. Sakura was hopelessly outmatched in terms of power. But she was fighting on her home turf, in a confined space, with a single, absolute objective: protect the body behind her. She used every trick she knew, every trap she could devise. She threw kunai not to hit them, but to ricochet off the stone walls at unpredictable angles. She used paper bombs to create smoke and confusion. She fought with a ferocity that was born of pure desperation. Zaku, arrogant and overconfident, lunged at her. Just stay down, he roared, blasting a wave of compressed air from his palms. Sakura, instead of dodging, threw herself to the ground, grabbing his ankle and pulling, using his own momentum to send him crashing into the wall. She was on him in an instant, kunai at his throat. But Kin was already there, a senbon with a tin. Y bell attached whizzing past Sakura's ear. The faint, pure chime was a key, unlocking a genjutsu that sent a wave of vertigo through Sakura's mind. She staggered back, shaking her head, trying to clear the illusion. Dosu walked forward calmly. It is over, he said, raising his armored gauntlet. Your resolve is admirable, but pointless. Sakura, her vision swimming, knew she had one last card to play. One final, desperate act of defiance. She was out of tricks, out of chakra, out of time. With a defiant scream, she took her kunai and, in a single, decisive motion, sawed through her long, beautiful pink hair. The hair she had spent years growing to impress Sasuke. It was a symbolic act, a severing of her old self, of the weak girl who had defined herself by the boy she loved. As the strands of pink fell to the dusty floor, she charged, a final, suicidal attack. Dosu simply sidestepped and struck her with the back of his hand. She was thrown against the wall, slumping to the ground, bloody, battered, but her eyes, even as they fluttered shut, were still fixed on Sasuke's form, a silent guardian to the very end. Pathetic, Kin sneered, but as Dosu stepped over Sakura's unconscious body, preparing to finish the job, a new voice spoke, cold and clear. The observation period is over. Naruto stood up. There was no golden light. There was no dramatic flare. But the temperature in the room seemed to drop by 20 degrees. The calm, detached observer was gone, replaced by something ancient, and vast, and utterly implacable. You have served your purpose, Naruto said, his voice a quiet, chillingly neutral tone. You have provided a valuable data point on the catalyst's effect and on my teammates' combat potential under extreme duress. That data has now been collected. You are no longer required. Dosu turned, his analytical mind sensing a threat far greater than any he had ever encountered. What are you? Naruto took a single step forward. Your primary weapon, Dosu Kinyuda, is sound. You channel chakra through the resonator on your arm to produce focused sonic frequencies that can disrupt the inner ear and rupture internal organs. A clever, if crude, application of physics. He raised a single finger. A low hum, almost too faint to hear, began to emanate from him. It was not a jutsu. It was a pure, perfectly controlled frequency. However, Naruto continued, his voice calm. Any wave can be cancelled by introducing its inverse. Any system can be broken by overloading it with its own resonant frequency. The hum grew in intensity. Dosu's eyes widened in horror. The resonator on his arm began to vibrate violently, glowing a dull red. He couldn't control it. It was feeding back, amplifying itself. What are you doing? He stammered, trying to rip the device off his arm. I am not doing anything, Naruto said. I am simply balancing the equation. With a final, piercing shriek, The resonator on Dosu's arm exploded, the sonic energy it contained turning inward. He screamed, clutching the mangled remains of his arm, his own weapon having been turned against him with horrifying precision. Zaku and Kin stared in absolute terror. He hadn't attacked. He had deconstructed their leader's power with a word and a hum. Naruto's cold, ancient blue eyes turned to them. You have two options. You can leave this room now and forfeit your objective. Or you can remain, and allow me to conduct a more thorough analysis of your biological modifications. The threat was not of death. It was of dissection, of being taken apart, piece by piece, by a being who saw them not as shinobi, but as fascinating, flawed pieces of machinery. It was not a choice. They grabbed their screaming, injured leader and fled, disappearing from the tower as if the hounds of hell were on their heels. The silence returned, deeper and more profound than before. Naruto walked over to Sakura's still form. He knelt, placing a hand on her forehead. A gentle, golden light flowed into her, not just healing her physical wounds, but soothing the frayed edges of her exhausted spirit. Her eyes fluttered open. The first thing she saw was his face, his expression calm and unreadable as always. But for the first time, she thought she saw something else in those ancient blue depths. Not pity, not praise, but a quiet, profound respect. You passed, he said softly. And from the other side of the room, a groan. Sasuke was sitting up, his body wreathed in a faint, black aura, the curse mark on his neck glowing with an ugly, vibrant light. He had seen the end of it. He had seen Sakura, bloody and broken at his feet. And he had seen Naruto, effortlessly, terrifyingly, dismiss a threat that had nearly killed her. The crucible was over, but the metal it had forged, Sakura's new resolve, Sasuke's new and terrible power, and Naruto's new and terrifying place in their world, was sharp and untested, and pointed directly at the heart of their future. Chapter 9 End. The End. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.